raise your placard? Okay.
Yeah. What about Nick?
Neg.
Nick.
So
Okay.
what I've included is nobody has prep.
Yeah.
I mean, you're
I think
100%
that's a fair assumption.
That is
What about
good.
the other bill on big tech? Everyone that has an AF, can you raise your placard, please?
Tech AF.
2, 3, 4. Okay, everyone with a
Big tech.
5. Everyone
Big
with a neg.
I mean, I'm flexible. I can commit to I'll commit to going neg right now, even though I don't have prep. Join me, guys. Join my excursion.
I mean, I'll try. I'll see what I can do. So Sungju and I guess, are going neg.
Okay. Okay. Mental health. Do we have a sponsor at least?
From the looks of it, I think it might be better to do the big tech bill first because they're more people.
Unfortunately, I think you're right. Okay. So big tech is their sponsor.
Is there anyone willing to take it?
If we do mental health first, I can write a sponsor. But I don't think we have a good enough slope.
And we.
So, okay. That's
Yikes! Yeah, this is difficult.
For big tech, if you give me like 5 minutes, I could probably put together a sponsor. But
Based.
You still have Judge
Absolutely
Paradigm.
based.
So.
From the looks of it, I think we probably just need a recess for everyone.
Yeah.
If you can get the sponsor done in 5 minutes, you can just probably do that during Judge Paradigms. So, is that the plan? Good with that? Okay, perfect. We'll go to the parliamentarian last. So first, Izzy Lou. Paradigm?
Me? Did you say my name?
I did. Would you like to say your paradigm?
Sure, I was ordering Starbucks. One moment. Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Isabella. I've been doing Congress for about 3 years now, and I just graduated out of high school, so I'm no longer on the circuit. Some of you guys might know me. Some of you guys might not know me. But my paradigm essentially is really simple. It's just Congress is the and in speech and debate for a reason. You have to do speech and debate. So while I do look for really good arguments and really good contentions, I also look for good rhetoric, good presentation, if your voice carries out and if it speaks to me, if you're not just sitting there reading from something. So a lot of that matters to me. Otherwise, I'm relatively flexible. I also hope that you guys can keep a civil round and be equally fair to each other. I think a lot of you guys have heard me say this, but try not to cut off each other. Try not to be too aggressive. Don't be outright rude because that will reflect poorly on you. And if it goes too far, I will call you out with no regrets. So other than that, have a good day or have a good round. I hope you guys all do well. And if nothing else, I'm going to go back to my Starbucks order. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Izzy. Akshat Parthaban?
Okay, so hi, I'm Akshat. I just finished competing. I'm a graduating senior. Competing in Congress for 4 years. I'm sure all of you guys know how to do Congress best. Just have fun, be respectful. There's not so many tournaments, so yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Neha Patla. Sorry if I'm saying that wrong.
You're good. Hi, everyone. That's Neha. I am a rising senior, and I've been doing congressional debate for the past 2 years. You will be seeing me on the circuit throughout next year as well, but I essentially just look for a direct clash after the first half. I think that's super important, and you need to interact with the debate. Also, I think presentation is super important, but I also kind of heavily prioritize debate itself. So I look for creative arguments that still make sense in terms of international and domestic policy. And then I also look for passion. And finally, questioning is super important to me. I think that's kind of overlooked. I like to see you interact with the debate.
Okay, perfect. Mr. Raffanengo?
Awesome. I'm just gonna ditto a lot of my fellow colleagues that are basically the idea that we need to keep the debate civil and ensuring that people don't talk over each other. I know Zoom doesn't make it the best place for talking over each other because it gets all disoriented. As a judge, I like seeing, even though this is a debate event, I like seeing speech in it. So being able to thematically tie up your speech together, adding nice intros, rhetoric, that really sells the impactfulness of all your arguments, but don't substitute that for good argumentation. I still want to see great argumentation around. That just gives you a higher boost on my rankings. And then pretty much that's it. I mean, I just want to see a great debate today, and a best of luck to everyone.
Finally, our parliamentarian, Mr. Cow.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Jacob Cow. I'm a rising senior. See a lot of familiar faces in here, so that's great. You'll see me more next year. Basically, what I look for in a debate is clear warranting. I think a lot of debaters, especially more advanced ones, skip over basic warrants. And like for a judge who has not researched this topic, I want you to like explain every single warrant and make sure that all your links are really clear. I also really value background and like status quo painting, even beyond the sponsorship, because I think that a lot of people miss that. And then that takes away from the uniqueness of their argument. So that's what I look for in content. In terms of rhetoric, you guys already heard it from all the other judges. So I'll just conclude there. Good luck, everyone.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So I will send the preset recency that a parliamentarian sent to me in chat for everyone to see. So there you go. And for clarity, questioning is going to be the opposite of that. So for example, Ethan has last recency for questioning. I'm tournament PO, so I can do this. Just going to skip some of the formalities. We can get straight to docket nomination. Any nominations on the floor? Senator Z.
Nomination for docket A, which reads item A, and then item B.
Okay, just to clarify, item A is mental health.
Item A is the big text.
Okay, perfect. So big tech first, mental health second. Are there any other doc nominations on the floor? Any motions?
Motion.
Gutierrez?
I move to close the floor for docket nominations.
Seconds. Wonderful. Looks like we have unanimous consent. So our first bill on the floor is the bill regarding big tech. Are there any sponsorship speeches? That goes to Senator Zhang.
I thank the chair. Hello, my name is Senator Zhang, speaking for the first time this session. At the leisure of all those above me, please give me any indication and I'll begin. I'm sorry, I can't really see everyone. Is everyone ready to go? Okay, awesome, thank you. In 2020, the United States has suffered so many numerous hacks, such as on meat production, transportation, hospitals, and one of the greater hacks of this year, the SolarWinds hacks. As we move into this new arena of fighting, we must arm ourselves with the appropriate cyber capabilities in order to defend and attack anyone who threatens our cybersecurities. That's why I urge you, senators, to pass my resolution in order to protect ourselves from these cyber attacks. First, let's understand the problem, and that's that cyber deterrence has failed to prevent hacks in the past. So we have committed to cyber deterrence, and that's meaning sanctions, indictments, and retaliation. According to the Wall Street Journal, in December of 2020, past American responses to Russian hacking and disinformation operations, such as sanctions, property seizures, diplomatic expulsions, even the cyber equivalents of warning shots, appear to have done little to dissuade the Kremlin. And The Atlantic in December of 2020 adds that in reality, deterrence works in very limited conditions when the culprit can be identified easily, when the behavior has crossed clear red lines defending unacceptable behavior, and when the punishments for crossing them is credible and known in advance to would-be hackers. But these conditions are rare in cyberspace. So due to the nature of cyberspace, deterrence is only a symbolic action to the damage of cyber attacks on our election security and confidential national security information. Our retaliation has failed to prevent further hacks and leaves us vulnerable to more misinformation campaigns and severe espionage from our adversaries. Cyber deterrence has not worked, and there is only one solution: my bill. Section 1 of this bill will implement a global intangible low tax income rate, and that will be raised actually to 21%, and 50% of that revenue will go to CISA. So CISA is important because According to NBC News, in February of 2019, the US Cyber Command and CISA, working with intelligence gathered by the NSA, shut down internet access at facilities of Russia's Internet Research Agency in the hours before the 2018 midterms and for a few days afterwards. And employees of the Internet Research Agency complained to their IT department about the disruption. And the Heritage Foundation gives more examples of how we've launched cyber attacks by saying in July of 2019, following the June attacks by Iran on oil tankers and then the downing of US armed drones, President Trump chose not to retaliate with physical attacks. Instead, he launched an offensive cyber strike that disabled the computer systems of Iran. Cyber attacks, which is what we encourage in this bill, combined with cyber protection and defense, are effective ways in order to protect ourselves from dangers, hacking, and misinformation from other nations. We can leverage our cyber attacks to inform other nations of our absolute intolerance of election meddling or drone attacks. So I urge you all, senators, to stand with me, protect our cybersecurity, and pass.
Thank you, Senator Zhang, for that speech of 3 minutes and 8 seconds. The chamber actually has to vote on this. We forgot earlier, but we can pick either 30-second questioning or 1-minute questioning. It's a tradition at some of these online tournaments to do the longer questioning in finals, but it is a vote. So if you want the 1-minute long questioning, please raise your placard. Wow. Okay. Only 3 people. Okay, so traditional 30-second questioning it is then. So we will go to a 2-minute questioning block, 4 30-second blocks. All questioners, please raise your placards. All questioners, please raise your placards. We have 4 of these. Okay, Senator Yoon.
I think the chair. All right, I'm just taking this question block but I'm just interested. How do we mechanize this legislation?
Can you please clarify what you mean by that?
Like, where does all this money come from?
It comes from the revenue from the tax.
From the GILTI tax, right? Like the GILTI tax is what it's called, Section 1.
The global intangible low tax income.
Yeah. The GILTI tax. If we can prove to you that that's like an objectively terrible way to tax people, then like, would you vote with us?
I think that funding CISA is also important.
Senator Vemulapati raised their placard. So Senator Vemulapati.
What is the benefit of continuously cyber attacking other countries like Russia?
Because those countries have hacked us, spread misinformation, and are attacking our critical infrastructure. So we have to show them that we have the capabilities in order to defend ourselves.
Why do we need to attack them, hurt their businesses, hurt their corporations? Like, just because they did something bad, does that mean we should do something bad in return?
I'm not saying we should do something bad, but I'm saying we have to find a very solid and effective way to prove to them that we are not accepting any of their attacks anymore.
Why does that mean hurting them instead?
Senator Pradhan.
Roughly how much money will be generated through this tax?
You tell me.
All right, okay. Now let's go on to the arguments made by Senator Vemulapati. You said that when we attack them, where's the warrant for that they'll stop and not just continue attacking us?
Well, we show the world that we are able to defend ourselves, and we just go one step further from the deterrence that we have used currently.
All right, but is there like a certain metric or warrant saying that they'll directly like stop and not just continue attacking us?
One more questioning block. Would anyone like to take it? Senator Wilkes.
What is the unique benefit of taxing big tech?
Well, we have to find some way in order to protect our cyber infrastructure.
Why is taxing big tech the best way, though?
Because big tech has a lot of taxable money.
I mean, okay, like, do they like play any role in cybersecurity whatsoever? Like, there's got to be a reason. They're intertwined in some way, right?
Well, big tech can provide us with some of their services, like they have done in the past, in order to help us.
If you tax big tech and they're providing services, then don't you hinder the services that are being provided to the government?
No, because big tech has a lot of resources currently, and we also have a lot of resources.
So yeah, like I said earlier, I'm going to send my PO sheet. So for the person in chat, just grab the link real quick. Where's chat? There we go. Okay, perfect. Everyone should be able to see that now. Hop on there and get all the information about the round. But with that said, that was the speech and the affirmation. So negative speakers, please raise your placards. All speakers on the negation, please raise your placards. We're not going to a second half. Like, negative speakers, raise your placards. No? Okay, the chair would highly recommend a 30-second in-house recess.
Motion.
Gutierrez,
I move for a 30-second recess in house.
seconds. Okay, unanimous consent. Okay, what's the plan, guys?
All right. So Sungju and I both said we can go neg. I would probably have to go a more late round. Sungju, I don't know about you.
I have to. I mean, I don't know if I can give this very neg. I actually have like literally nothing. I was planning on like listening to people first, but
Yeah, save. I'm not gonna lie, that was my plan too.
anyone else on negation that
is anyone
NP
else
prep?
on the neg?
Like an ounce of neg prep. Like it's better than nothing.
How much time can we allocate to someone prepping neg?
Two Fs in a row. Senator Carroll, thank you.
I'm so sorry. Thank you. This is Representative Carroll speaking for the first time in this finals round. That's CARROLL. I will be self-timing myself if that's all right with the judge and the PO. You guys just give me thumbs up or anything when you guys are ready. All right. If you watch Criminal Minds, we all know the greatest hacker ever, Penelope Garcia, who could probably take down all the hackers in the world if she needed to. But sadly, that character does not exist in the real world, and something needs to be done to help the United States from further attacks. So, senators, we need to pass today for two reasons. One, we need to strengthen our cybersecurity, and second, the funding is coming from a stable source. For senators, we need to strengthen our cybersecurity, especially from Russia, who has conducted some of the biggest hacks against the United States. Let's review a few. To expand on Representative Zhang's speech and how damaging it was, the SolarWinds hack, which Brad Smith, president of Microsoft, considered the largest and most sophisticated attacks ever. In 2020, hackers from Russia broke into SolarWinds, located in Texas, adding malicious code into a system called Orion. Orion is used by 33,000 customers. The hackers sent a software update with the code, which created a backdoor to customers' information technology systems, where the hackers implemented malware to spy on these different companies. 18,000 companies were affected, including the Department of Homeland Security, National Nuclear Security Admin, and even the Treasury Department. The hack was so stealth, it went undetected for months. In 2015, Russian hackers broke into email servers in the White House. And we are all aware of Russia being questioned for interfering with the last two presidential elections. Since these hacks, we have to assume every network in this country is potentially compromised. All the data could be compromised, and every network should be assumed that there is a backdoor which Russian hackers can gain entry and take control of. This includes all critical infrastructure networks, power plants, air control, and other things, and as well as all networks owned by financial companies. But we don't know what the Russians will do next. So by passing, we are protecting us. But second, by funding cybersecurity and infrastructure agency, the United States Cyber Command, we are going to be able to acquire the tools needed, the training, specialists, and more. The United States has been bagged on for its lack of digital experiences. Forbes says that agencies responsible for protecting our digital infrastructure don't get enough money and don't spend enough money to do so. To explain Senators Wilk's question during the sponsorship CX, using the money from Guilty is the most stable place to ensure we are giving the funding to these companies, to ensure the people of the United States that they are safe, and to further train in our defense against Russia. Guilty is a tax on American businesses who manufacture their products overseas, which is done ultimately because it is cheaper. Raising the tax will still be cheaper than returning to the United States, so we won't have to worry about owners not paying because it's cheaper no matter what than moving back to the US. This bill is going to protect strengthen the U.S. cybersecurity, and over time, as training is implemented, will further prohibit any future attacks. So, senators, if you wish to keep your emails private and make sure that you are safe online, you need to affirm today. The United States could do a lot more if given the chance, and this bill allows for the perfect stream of revenue. So we need to pass. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carroll, for that speech of 3 minutes and 5 seconds. We're now going to move into 2 blocks of questioning, not 4. 4 will be for the first negation, whenever that hopefully happens. All questioners, please raise your placards. Okay, come on now. All questioners, please raise your placards. Okay, Senator Zay.
Senator Z. And Senator Carroll, do you have any incentive that the constituents wouldn't be, that constituents' information will be protected?
Well, training can help by preventing hacks, therefore further protecting.
I meant constituents' information being protected from the U.S. government, because we have seen multiple occurrences of U.S. government abusing constituents' information.
I don't think that's what this bill is about. I think we're more focused on Russia hacking into United States systems. That's a different debate for a different time.
But this is tech in general, right?
The bill in Section A says that this is...
Hi, so once again, do you know how much money today's legislation will raise?
50%, or I'm sure you could tell me.
I cannot, and I think it's the burden of the affirmation to tell us how much your legislation is providing for cyber defense.
We know that it's going to provide some sort of money, and Forbes even said that we don't spend enough, so some sort of money is going to get us somewhere. We need tools and computers and people, and giving money to training. We'll do something. We have to do something to protect ourselves.
Thank you. Thank you. Since that was an affirmative speech, negative speakers, please raise your placards. All negative speakers, please raise your placards. We are not about to do 3 apps in a row.
It's starting to look like real Congress. We're trying to start filibustering.
Senator Wilkes.
Motion.
State that.
Call for a 30-second in-house recess.
Okay, skip the seconds. Granted. So, come on. Who's writing an egg?
Can we just have like a 5-minute recess or something? And then
Okay, if I have 5 minutes, maybe I could like pull up enough XSTEM Genie cards to give a speech.
to be honest, it's just really hard to write a neg on this because like there's not.
I mean, I can write one. I just need 5 minutes.
I mean, okay, for our judges, are any of you guys on like strict time obligations? Like, no, I'm seeing shaking heads.
Just chilling.
Speak up now.
I would
Okay.
prefer a recess so I can pick up my drinks.
Okay, we're going to take a very unfortunate 5-minute recess here. I don't care about the parliamentary procedure.
All right, I'm gonna go like XSTEM Genie.
recess has elapsed. Okay, wonderful. Still waiting on 2 competitors. They have a couple seconds and then we're ditching them. Okay, one more senator, so that's fine. Okay, perfect. That's everyone. We just had our second speech and affirmation. Now calling for our first negation speech once again. Negative speakers, raise your placards.
Oh, that's me.
Senator Yoon.
I think the chair, for the reference of the chamber, that is Senator Yoon, spelled Y-O-O-N. Is anybody not ready at this point? All righty, we'll get right into it. Speaking a little bit earlier, actually a lot earlier. I almost never speak early, but this will be fun. All right, I will begin. There's a common sociological principle and Bible aphorism that states that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. That is to say, virtuous intent can very well lead to evil outcomes. But when the economic lives and livelihoods of innocent people around the world are going to be hurt, when our mistakes flow downstream and take money out of the pockets of our citizens, and when this legislation works for nobody but against all, I say this to the affirmation: good intentions simply aren't good enough. Stand with me and fail. Let's begin by examining what the affirmation has told you so far. Everyone from Senator Zhang to Senator Carroll on their side of this legislature tells you why cybersecurity is so crucial and the impacts of upgrading the security writ large. Crucially, as a top-shelf response on their overview, this is an irresponsible way to frame this discussion. Understand that there are 2 parts, not one, of this legislation. First, the taxation mechanism, which is followed by and funding CISA. Senator Zhang, in questioning with me, makes an important concession. When I asked them about the funding, they concede that they don't actually have a unique reason as to why Section 1's global intangible low tax income rate being raised to 21% is uniquely good. At that second of this concession of both Senator Zhang and Carroll make, while rationalizing the global intangible low tax income, or GILTI, is the second they lost this debate. C. Turn to James Carter, former U.S. Undersecretary of the Treasury, and Douglas Holtz-Eakin, former Director of the Congressional Budget Office for the Hill in September 2018, who explains that the GILTI tax is a terrible way to mechanize Congress's projects. So what is the GILTI tax? Essentially, all it is in the status quo is corporate income tax on US-based corporations that make money overseas. If Walmart wants to branch out to, say, Denmark, where corporate tax is almost non-existent, they have to pay that corporate tax to the US instead. And as Senator Carroll extends in their speech, it's to disincentivize companies from outsourcing too far, and at its purest, it's honestly not a bad idea. But crucially, as the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal explains in April 2021, the implementation of the GILTI tax is where everything went objectively wrong. See, as the WSJ extends, GILTI was flawed from the start because it fails to correctly identify and dichotomize what money should actually be taxed because of crucial flaws in the way the legislation was written. That's why investment firm Moss and Adams furthers in February 2018 that GILTI too often ends up taxing the retirement accounts of average United States citizens because of the way that it's objectively written. In the status quo, Moss and Adams furthers that the tax rate for GILTI is 10.5%, but if you raise it to 21%, that means you're going to be taking that exact tax money away from the hardworking Americans who put money away from their retirement all their lives. At that point, you negate because this mechanism is a terrible way to fund this project. As I look across this chamber, I'm reminded of why I stand in the negation in the first place. Because there are thousands of people named Angie Carroll, Ethan Wilkes, and Sarah Zhang out there. Real people whose economic lives will be changed for the better and made maybe just a bit easier in their retirement when we fail this legislation. I know their fights are worth taking, but my question to this Senate is, to you?
Thank you, Senator Yoon, for that speech of 3 minutes and 8 seconds. Now moving into actually 4 blocks of questions because this is our first negation speech. Negative speakers, please raise your placards. That goes first to you're gonna have to correct me again. Dringa? Sorry.
Dingra.
Dingra. Okay, I'll remember that. Thank you.
Hi, Representative. Good speech. So I want to understand what's, I guess, the alternative to gain revenue to fight back against cyber attacks if we weren't to use like the GILTI tax? Because I want to understand, would we like shift to taxing like Americans just here in the United States, or Like, what would be?
That's something that we ought to look at, right? I'm just saying that guilty is objectively flawed. I mean, we've debated the carbon tax today. We could raise other corporate income taxes, but guilty targets retirement accounts.
But what I'm trying to understand is, where have you provided, like, I guess, a comparative between guilty tax and
I
an
didn't.
alternative?
I mean, that's not my burden as the negation. I just have to prove to you why this is terrible, not what alternative there is.
Hi, Senator. Exactly how many retirement accounts have been targeted by this tax?
Like every single one of them.
Every single one of them?
Every IRA that exists in America is going to, or like, I guess 501k.
Okay. So does the guilty tax target any other companies or any other?
It targets its intent was like big corporations and corporate income tax, but it ends up hurting, like, it needs reform basically, right? Like, it needs serious reform.
Okay. I yield the rest of the time.
Senator Carroll.
I thank the chair. Senator, are we just going to continue to let Russian hackers get into our systems, even though we know people will continue to pay the guilty tax?
No, that's a terrible misconstruction of what I'm saying. You can, like, go tax anything else other than, like, elderly Americans' retirement accounts to fund this project.
But we know that people are going to continue paying this tax because it's cheaper to produce stuff overseas. So no matter what, like.
Okay, yeah, but elderly Americans, like, think of the hardworking teacher that worked 40 years all just to lose their money to guilty.
What has a bigger impact, the guilty tax or cybersecurity?
See, this is the problem with what Senator Carroll was saying as well. Like, it's not one or the other. It's not mutually exclusive. All you have to do is reform the tax first. Don't put the cart before the horse, or find another tax that doesn't take away money from, like, retired Americans.
For your argument to be true, you have to prove the comparative against other funding mechanisms. Where in your speech?
Okay, yeah, then I don't, because I only have 3 minutes and I had 3 minutes to prepare the speech as well. But crucial, I would support a carbon tax for this. I think carbon taxes are kind of based.
Okay, Sangju. Thank you. Since that was a speech negation, all affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. That goes to Senator Wilkes off preset recency.
Thank you, Chair. Senator Wilkes, Wilkes. E is silent for the pronunciation of the chamber. Oops. I'll give everybody a second. Let me know if you're not ready, though. Okay, looks like we're all good. I'll go ahead and get started. Every year at the DEF CON convention in Las Vegas, hackers gather to test the limits of US infrastructure, and their findings are interesting to say the least. For example, 2 years ago, it took a 12-year-old girl 10 minutes to hack into a replica of a government database where information about the grid would be stored. American cybersecurity is falling deeply behind. That's why we should hit the reboot button and pass this bill. The primary reason you pass this bill is it restores the American cyber grid. Under the status quo, the American cyber grid is at a consistent vulnerability from foreign attacks. A mission support center report from the Idaho National Library quantifies that there were 295 large-scale foreign attacks on US infrastructure in 2015. But why does this happen? A lack of government attention is a leading reason. A 2020 meta-study published by the RAND Corporation concluded that the wimpy American cyber grid is caused by the government not spending enough money on defense and big tech companies filling in the role with a for-profit model. That is not paraphrased. The RAND Corporation called us wimpy. How does this bill fix this issue? Section 1 increases the tax on big tech and uses that money to reboot our cybersecurity. This increases the defense power of the government and decreases the power of big tech. Senator Yoon, you ask what the unique reason for limiting big tech is. Here is your answer. The University of Oslo found in March of 2019 that big tech has a for-profit model in cybersecurity, including leaking critical information and having poor cyber defense, since the government will pay them regardless of the quality they provide. This bill lowers their ability to intervene in cyber operations under Senator Yoon's own logic. This decreases the amount of attacks on the US because we provide better deterrence than what big tech provides in the status quo. Here's the comparative analysis that Senator Yoon was missing. The Armed Force Communication and Electronics Association Cyber Committee concludes that because of this warranting, funding CISA adds far higher deterrence levels against foreign governments. Why is deterrence in protecting our cyber grid from future attacks the most important impact in this debate? First, lives are on the line. Brad Plumer from Vox writes that if outages as a result of a cyber attack on the US energy occurred during times of extreme weather, thousands of deaths would occur due to heat stress or exposure to the cold. And importantly, this disproportionately impacts healthcare facilities. The Harvard Business Review writes on January 23rd of 2020 that the California blackouts of 2019 caused 248 hospitals to lose power. But this extends further than what's already happened. International cyber capabilities are constantly growing, which are even more devastating. Senator Yoon, here is how the AF outweighs. Power Magazine writes on July 22nd of 2015 that an EMP or GMB pulse on the US energy grid could result in nearly 300 million deaths. It took a 12-year-old 10 minutes to break down the security of a government database. But it takes the 12 of us the same amount of time to protect the security of our country.
Thank you, Senator Wilkes, for that speech of 3 minutes and 6 seconds. We'll now move into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please raise your placards. That goes first to Gutierrez.
Hi, Senator. So I think the affirmative and negative agree. Cybersecurity is pretty important to fund, right?
Yep.
Why specifically is a JITLI tax the best way to do so?
I told you in my speech, because it limits big tech's abuse of power in cybersecurity that is in the status quo.
I mean, if big tech is propping up small businesses and other organizations and actually helping them out, why should we end up hurting them when we could fund it?
I would also question that as well. Big tech is notable for
big tech provides a platform for small businesses to actually fund stuff like.
I mean, sure. I also told you how 300.
Why should we use it?
300. This is really important. Okay, why would we not prioritize like a raised big tech tax in America over a guilty tax that is hurting like retired Americans?
Because big tech has an international platform to leak like critical US cyber information.
Okay, but you can tax them in the United States. That doesn't really change anything. You make money either way.
Just taxing the United States, you lower your leverage to tax them internationally. Like international, like
you can like I'm telling you. Okay, then why would we not prioritize guilty reform before we pass this?
Thank you. So that was an affirmative speech for moving to the negation. Negative speakers, raise your placards. Senator Z.
Hi, this is Senator Z speaking for the first time this session, and I guess I went earlier than expected. By the leisure of those above me, please give me a thumbs up when you're ready. Or just saying you're not ready. Okay, I think most of my judges are ready. Okay. In the famous television SpongeBob, Squidward says, I order the food, you cook the food, the customer gets the food. We do that for 40 years and then we die. Senators, today, let us not die and stand with me in negation of this bill for these 2 very reasons. Because 1, there is no actual implementation in this legislation. Secondly, many of today's senators fail to take into consideration of what taxing a big tech company can lead into. But first, let's fail because the sponsor of this speech, Senator Zhang, argues that the US government tech must improve in order to protect national security information. However, she fails to realize about how much of the tech companies avoid paying the taxes, as well as Senator Carroll failing to realize during questioning on where the money actually comes from. According to Fortune 2019, to the report between 2010 and 2019, using legal tax avoidance strategies have become popular among corporations. The taxes paid collectively by the companies across all global territories in which they operate was $155.3 billion, less than what the actual tax rates would have required. And even though in Section 2, where it states that we will tax, there's no actual implementation of this. And today you failed today's legislation because of that. And secondly, on the Christian Science Monitor in May of 2021, they said that corporations take advantage of inconsistencies in the law by finding creative ways to shift profits overseas and reducing their tax bills at home, says Dr. Torzloff. So we failed today's legislation because we have no actual way of taxing the big tech companies to fund our cybersecurity. Second, you failed today's legislation because Senator Carroll and Zhang both argue that the big tech company are essentially happy to comply with the taxing, but fails to realize what a big tech company can do against the US government. So let me take the time to explain the actual status quo. According to the International Trade Organization, while US companies and individuals can lawfully engage in a broad range of business activities involving Russia, that are not subject to sanction, penalties for violating US sanctions can be severe. So what does this mean? US big tech companies can work with Russia even though we're taxing them under this legislation, which throws out this entire legislation out the window. And then only Reuters June of 2017 backs this information when they say US officials say they have warned firms about the risk of allowing the Russians to review their product source codes, but of fears it could be used in cyber attacks. But they said that they have no legal authority to stop the practice. And so when you pass today's legislation, we're not going to be stopping anything. Instead, we're going to incentivize the big tech companies to work with Russia instead. So senators, let us not die by cooking food for 40 years and assume that big tech companies will sell information to Russia and assume we have a good way to get the money, but fails today's legislation.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 11 seconds. Now back into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, raise your placards. That'll go first to Dingra.
Hi, Representative. Good speech. So you frame a lot of your speech about how big tech companies value this money, and so if we were to tax them, that's bad. You also say they're going to work with Russia. The United States government can put increased fees, increased punishments, all those restrictions on companies if they were to work with Russia. And since these big companies, as you said, prioritize money, why would they work with Russia?
I never said they prioritize money, but I'm saying that when we incentivize a big tax on the companies, they can also work with Russia. We don't have any legal obligation to stop the big tech companies from working with Russia.
So what I want to understand is if they don't prioritize money, why would they be so hurt by the tax that's helping?
There's 1 block left. Who's going to take it? Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is you yourself just said they don't value this money. I'm trying to understand if they don't prioritize all money, why would they be so hurt by a tax that is trying to combat like misinformation in their own
So the tax is 21%, and that's pretty steep according to the legislation. And just taxing any company why would anyone be subject? Also, we don't have a good way to actually implement the tax. Nowhere there's legislation because all these companies are avoiding the tax.
And they wouldn't want to take on fees by working with Russia.
Thank you. For the question in chat, everything's working fine on my end. I think there's a technical issue on your end, Senator Carroll. Can you hear me say that? Might have audio.
I can hear everybody. I cannot see a single person. I know we don't have to ask for point of personal privilege, so I'm going to exit the chamber and try to get back in to see if that works.
Okay, yeah, wonderful. That's perfect. And since you already spoke, that should be okay.
Thanks.
So that was a speech. Sorry, someone say something? Okay, perfect. Since that was a speech of negation, affirmative speakers, raise your placards. Wow, we have 2 people this time. That goes to Dringa.
I thank the chair. For reference, this is Representative Dingra, spelled Dhingra. Is everyone good to go? Great. And I'll be timing myself for reference. Too often, when taking a look at the impact of a legislation, we look at the big numbers and statistics. We fail to isolate the impact that it has directly on the daily lives of our constituents. The daily life of a single mother who's working 3 jobs just to put 1 meal on the table. The daily lives of African Americans doing whatever they can to fight back against police brutality and gain back their rights. And the daily lives of other minority groups. Pass, because the money we receive from these taxes will go a long way for our people. Now, this debate fundamentally boils down to whether or not we're using the most effective system of taxing and how effective that will be combating the cyber attacks that are happening. Representative Carroll, you talk about Russian hacking, but you fail to explain the direct impact that this hacking has on our democracy and our communities. Let me answer that question and distance myself from others, proving how this will be a direct attack on our democracy and minorities as a whole. NBC News in 2017 finds that 126 million Americans received Russian-backed misinformation during the 2016 election, and that over 677,000 Twitter users were traced back to direct interactions which spilled over into hacking sprees. This is really important because it influenced their political views of the overall election and hence disincentivized many minorities, as I'll prove later on, from actually voting in the first place. This piece of legislation is very key to combat this exact streak. because The Verge in 2020 finds that the CISA, which is one of the main actors for this legislation, is trying to combat this election scandal, which is on their agenda. This type of funding will provide them their agenda and allow them to do their job. It's the best way to do so. Refer to Representative Wilkes, who talks about how this exact taxing is the most cost-effective means, which means we have met your burden, Representative Marwaha and Yoon, proving that we get millions from these big companies and that it'll be effective. And Representative Jay, you tell us that big tech will work with Russia if we were to tax them, but you yourself concede in cross-examination that they are incentivized by this money and don't want to get hurt by these taxes in the first place, which means that if we were to put even more taxes, fees, or punishments for them working with Russia, they would be disincentivized from doing so. But what is the impact of not passing and not helping our constituents in the long run? The German Marshall Fund in 2018 tells us that Russia uses this type of fake news to mislead Americans on divisive issues like guns, immigration, and LGBT rights, making informed discussion practically impossible with their hacking sprees as a whole. And the Brookings Institute in 2018 continues that Russia used fake blacktivist and woke Black accounts to disincentivize African Americans on speaking on issues that they really think are important. Representative Yoon, I draw the line when our minorities are being misinformed, our voices are being silenced, and our democracy is being attacked. I agree that these taxes might hurt some of our constituents. I agree that big tech might have some obstacles along the way. But when it comes to minority voices and the pillars of our democracy, you're affirming.
Thank you for that speech of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. We'll now be moving into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please raise your placards. Yoon.
Okay, why is the flawed guilty tax that needs reform according to the Treasury Department, because it affects 80 million elderly retired Americans' pockets, like better than increasing big tech corporate tax in America through a different mechanism? Like that's, you haven't met my burden yet. That's like my objective.
So I also referred to this back when I was answering, or I was asking you a question earlier, but you didn't provide any like comparative between, something like the carbon tax that you proposed or the guilty tax, for instance. Representative Wilkes.
Right. You know why? Because I just have to prove to you why this is like going to hurt 80 million people.
But you need
and then
to
we can
provide
talk about that after. I can give you a counter model like on the next piece of legislation.
So what incentive or what are we going to do to stop the big tech companies from avoiding the taxes?
I don't know what you mean by avoiding the taxes. Like if you instill this type of tax on their, out international, I guess.
Right. But there's so many legal ways to avoid the taxes. So what can we do to make sure?
Okay, so I referred to this also when I asked you a question, but you can add new things like increased punishment, increased fees, increased things, whether it comes to interacting with Russia or avoiding the taxes in the first place. What I need to prove is that this tax is a good thing. And
Thank you very much. Since that was a speech and affirmation, negative speakers, raise your placards. That goes to Senator Pradhan.
All right, thank you. My name is Senator Pradhan, which is spelled Pradhan. And this is my first speech in this legislative session. And when all the powers above me are ready, just give me a thumbs up.
And a quick reminder to the half of the round that's already spoken, it's a good time to start prepping mental health. We do not want this bad split again, but yeah.
All right, assuming everyone's ready. I'll be speaking on the mic. Timer, 3, 2, 1. This chamber is like a boat racing competition, where naturally most people generally try making stronger boats. However, the affirmative side has found a new strategy, poking holes in their own boats. And as we should know, this strategy does not work. Because it is necessary to strengthen tech companies to fight cyber attacks in the first place, I stand in the firmest negations. First, let's consider the argument on funding. Primarily, the most important thing we must understand in the session is that GLTI taxes are not the way to go. Senator Zhang, alongside Senator Carroll, both effectively provide no substantive evidence on why the GLTI tax is necessary specifically, especially when questioned by Senator Yoon in the cross-examination period. As a result, there's a critical argument that a GLTI tax will end up punishing our own corporations. As EXAA explains, unfortunately, all businesses are vulnerable to cyber attacks. According to Risk-Based Security, Q1 of 2020 was one of the worst in the history of breaches. Over 8 billion records were hacked. These corporations need significant infrastructure to combat these problems, and they're not only limited to big tech. As such, and is explained by Senator Yoon, the GLTI tax does not work in the first place because it harms our own corporations alongside individuals like retired Americans. There's also no specific guarantee for how much money will be raised, as evidenced by Senator Zhang and Senator Carroll not providing an actual metric for how much money they should be able to gather through these taxes, even though Senator Marwaha specifically says that the affirmative must do that. Furthermore, Senator Dhingra says that they have met their burden, but they have not. When they continue to provide no justification for why that tax itself is necessary, when questioned by Senator Yoon countless times, we need time to think on this bill, and the affirmative tries to rush it. Senator Wilkes, big tech has poor defense, all right, but you ignore countless other companies that would fall under this tax. You're essentially harming your own vote. Further, consider the implications of launching cyber attacks on other nations. We literally cannot do that, as the Washington Post explains just a few days ago. Russia and the US, alongside 23 other countries, recently reaffirmed that the states should not hack each other's critical infrastructure in peacetime or shelter cyber criminals who conduct attacks on other countries. If the US engages through this bill, we harm our own credibility, and violating this agreement means we essentially trigger other adversaries to violate these agreements as well. Senator Dhingra, you are facilitating more hacking on the American people themselves. You aren't helping the single mother nor the minorities. You're making their lives worse. The affirmation must realize that they are literally poking holes in their own boat. Essentially, the impact is evident. The affirmative has nothing better than blatant promises, but they are doomed to fail. Although both sides agree that cybersecurity is necessary, this is absolutely not the road to take. Thus, I urge all my fellow senators to vote in the strongest negation on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pradhan, for that speech of 2 minutes and 59 seconds. Now moving into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, raise your placards. That goes first to Nowinski.
Hey, Representative. Considering that the companies that we're taxing with this bill are huge multinational corporations, why wouldn't they have the resources to cover themselves from cybersecurity attacks?
Essentially, let's consider the status quo in and of itself. These companies already don't have the proper resources, and I'm putting more taxes on them. We're just making their conditions far worse.
Yeah, but it's hard for me to believe that they don't have the resources when they're generating like billions of dollars in revenue.
Yeah, but their own cybersecurity has been worse. They don't have the infrastructure needed, and taxing makes it worse.
Hi, Senator. Would this tax still generate money?
Yes, the tax generates money, but what I'm saying is that it doesn't generate enough money to actually like solve for all of the problems that you're presenting.
Yeah, and exactly how much would it cost to solve for all the problems that we have?
It cost in the billions. Let's consider some problems. First, the bill argues for 2 major things. First is essentially that we boost our own cybersecurity. That's where 50% is going, and the other 50% is going to offensive attacks. Our cybersecurity is, as we can agree, not very strong, and it'll need billions to do that, and this bill doesn't give us billions to do
Thank you very much. That was a negative speech. Affirmative speakers, please rise. That goes to, off of preset recency, Marwaha.
I thank the chair. Hello, everyone. This is Representative Marwaha. I know there's a lot of judges, so I'm just going to give it a moment and then begin. Awesome. Let's not beat around the bush. There are 12 of us in this room, and I'm pretty sure that out of the 12 of us, none of us understood what the GILTI tax or a CFC was going into this round. And that's all right. But what isn't so cool is that it's pretty apparent now that cyber warfare is the wave of the future. But it seems that alongside our prepping habits, the United States' cybersecurity and technology is stuck in the past. Let's bring everything up to speed and pass this legislation. Pass. So first, I want to focus on one of the main issues that have been going on throughout this debate: solvency. Does today's legislation generate substantial revenue to make an impact? And the answer is yes. So we will see Senator Dhingra's and all of the affirmations impacts come to fruition. But why exactly does it come true? In Section 1, we raised the GILTI tax to 21%, like it's been discussed throughout the round. Currently, according to Michelle Scott on January 27th of 2021 on Investopedia, in the status quo, the tax is 10 to 13%, meaning we're increasing it by 8%. That is a substantial increase. But Who exactly is affected? CFCs, great. But what is the CFC? Who is the CFC? According to that same article, Apple, Goldman Sachs, Microsoft, Cisco, and other giant companies are these CFC companies that are getting below this 13% rate. Senator Yoon and Pradhan, you ask why specifically the guilty tax? Why not other methods? You propose carbon taxes and other solutions. Let me tell you why the guilty tax is so great. The current corporate tax rate is 21%. The guilty tax is 13%. We increase it to 21%. This means we even the playing field for all the competitors in the field. Once the tax rate is evenly 21%, we allow more competition and more innovation because it is more fair to companies that are not CFCs. Therefore, you pass to increase innovation, helping cybersecurity in the future. Senator Yoon, you also mentioned that the guilty tax needs reform, that the money from this tax is getting taken from retirement accounts of elderly Americans. And I'm right with you. That is a terrible issue that should not be happening. But I have great news for the both of us. According to the Tax Foundation, on March 16th of 2021, Daniel Bunn mentions that the Biden administration is actually working on reforming the program as we speak. There are reforms going on in the status quo to fix these issues that you and I care about. That means that in the future, we will have a guilty tax that evens the playing field without the plagues that Senator Yoon mentions. And I think that is absolutely the best solution to go to, because these multi-billion-dollar companies definitely can afford the tax increase. So where does that leave us? That means we have space, we have solvency, that we're going to get cyber technology in the future. Why is offense the best option? Why should we increase the conflict? Because cyber deterrence, as the author mentioned oh so long ago, was not working. Let's stand up to Russia. Let's understand that it's never too late to fix the system and pass this legislation.
Thank you, Senator Maraha, for the speech of 3 minutes and 8 seconds. Now moving into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please raise your placards. That goes first to Senator Gutierrez and Yoon.
Thank you. Hi, Senator. So this guilty tax is going to affect big tech at the most, right?
Absolutely. And
right.
other
And does,
large corporations.
does big tech help other corporations too?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do. Right. So if you pass this legislation and you increase their payrolls, don't they just pass those costs on to other businesses?
So what I think is important to realize is that they won't be needing to do that. Apple is a $1 trillion company.
Don't they want to
can
maintain
handle-
their profit margins?
Yeah, they will. I mean, I don't think
Right,
Apple
exactly. So why should we further hinder those companies by increasing those costs?
They can definitely take a revenue hit. I think it's important to increase cyber technology.
Senator, you just made a really great argument for like my side. How long does tax code reform take?
I'm sure it takes a long time. Yes.
Yeah. When Obama tried to implement ACJ tax reforms, like it took him 8 years throughout his administration. Are we going to let elderly Americans suffer for 8 years before we like suddenly reform it like you claimed you're going to do?
See, I think it's important to realize the guilty tax was created in 2017. It's only been 4 years. The program is being worked on.
Do we have any proof that it'll be reformed within the next 8 years or like any reasonable time span? Because I'm not willing to take the chance to take away the money of 80 million retired and elderly Americans.
Since that was a speech on the affirmation, negative speakers, please raise your placards. That goes first to Sinha.
I thank the chair. Hi, everyone. I'm Senator Sinha, spelled S-I-N-H-A, speaking for the first time in today's legislative session on the negation. I'm just going to pull out my timer real quick, and then judges, Parley, PO, I'm going to assume y'all are ready to go. Okay, cool. When the internet first became a thing that every household had, we marveled at their ability to provide us with information and connect us with other people. But what we failed to see was the malicious, dangerous content lurking just below the surface. I agree with the affirmative side that cybersecurity is something we should strive to achieve and improve, but it's because this bill fails to do this that we negate. I want to take a step back from the tax debate. Even if we assume that this is the moral way to pay for increased cybersecurity, the fact of the matter is that this money still isn't going to better our cybersecurity. And allow me to explain why. It's because all of the affirmative senators, Senator Zhang, Carroll, and Dhingra, don't tell us the reason why our cybersecurity lacks finesse. Because while increased cybersecurity budgets can help us acquire some tools to protect our assets, they don't address the biggest problem of all, and that's people. So let's break this down. In 2019, the Verizon Data Breach Investigations Report tells us that the most common cyber attack involves some form of phishing. And Forbes tells us on April 23rd of 2018 that phishing depends on one key factor, human error, specifically a person's ability to differentiate between a malicious message and an authentic one. In one form of phishing, the type of attack that involves sending people emails from trusted or legitimate-looking sources to elicit sensitive information. This information can then be used to gain access to a network or to target other users with malware. This allows hackers to manipulate digitally unsophisticated individuals at their will. This technological ignorance we're seeing in the United States is due to a deficiency in digital expertise driven by an aging working force. To close this knowledge gap, it requires that as cybersecurity spending increases, resources be used to hire the appropriate talent and properly train any employee with so much as an email address. It requires lawmakers and agency leaders to take digital education more seriously. It requires tapping into younger staffers to help bring them up to speed. Departments and offices need to make concerted efforts to re-envision their culture, workforce, and professional development strategies to include these cybersecurity knowledge. But the problem with today's legislation is that the money we collect with this bill just goes into bolstering computer systems. Just look at Section 2 and all the definitions. Basically, this bill isn't going to solve for any of our cybersecurity issues because a larger budget without the right people is ultimately worthless. This legislation does nothing to solve the actual issue with U.S. cybersecurity. Unless we cultivate cybersecurity conscious cultures, hackers will increasingly find the front doors to our nation's physical systems unlocked and wide open. Senator Wilkes, I agree with what you said in your speech on the importance of this issue, that lives are on the line, but this legislation does nothing to save them. This legislation doesn't do anything to help U.S. cybersecurity, and that's why you fail.
Thank you, Senator Sinha, for the speech of 2 minutes and 56 seconds. Now moving to 2 blocks of question, and questioners raise your placards. That goes first to Carol and then Nowinski.
I thank the chair. Hi, Senator. I did mention in my speech that this money can be allocated into training and practice. So what's to say the money from this bill isn't going to be used in such trainings?
Well, I mean, it's not really about what you said in your speech. We can just look at the legislation.
You had said that we had failed to realize that training isn't going to be, or like there's no money used for training, which I specifically said in my speech that it could be used for specialists.
Where does it talk about training?
It doesn't. It says that money will be given towards.
Thank you so much, Marwaha.
I thank the chair.
Hi, so is today's legislation about cyber offense or preventing cyber attacks?
Both. They talk about defense and offense.
Right. So phishing is a totally separate issue. Why can't we tackle that on a different legislation and let this one be focused on deterring Russian hacking?
Phishing is a cyber attack, and it's representative of a larger problem with cyber attacks, which is that it depends on human error. So principally, you're not going to be solving
But is the Russian government doing phishing, or is it hacking into databases, government databases, and attacking government large profiles?
Thank you. That was an aff. That was an egg. Let's call for an aff. Affirmative speakers, please rise. That goes to Nowinski.
I thank the chair. As Congress people, we have to represent our constituents. I know that sounds plain and simple, and you've probably heard it multiple times before, but it's at the heart of our jobs. And sometimes I think we forget that. Principally pass this bill because it prioritizes the constituents and people of America over the interests of multinational corporations. Other representatives have zeroed in on the economics of this bill, like the GILTI tax. But I want to be the first representative to really delve into the second part of this bill and its benefits, where we increase cybersecurity by taking the funds generated by the tax and putting them into government cybersecurity programs like CISA and the United States Cyber Command. This allocation of taxes is essential. It's more important than any impact the NEG can provide or has provided thus far. According to the Department of Justice on May 31st, 2021, cyber attacks on US infrastructure are rising. Adversaries are ramping up online attacks, and rapid technological advances have allowed foreign foreign countries to execute rapid supply chain attacks. Even countries like North Korea, which can't compete with the US on a political level, have built a cyber force capable of causing international disruptions. Large-scale cyber attacks have accelerated, and they're more dangerous than ever before. Russia, for example, recently has taken to cyber attacking hospitals, quite literally intending to kill or injure as many people as possible. And if we don't get our cybersecurity program in gear, they will succeed in murdering thousands across the country. And according to VPN, on June 13th, 2021, cyber attacks are the biggest threat to the economy, perhaps even greater than the Great Recession of 2008. When the circulation and flow of our country is cut off due to a lack of cybersecurity, the basic necessities we take for granted, including food, water, and electricity, could be in jeopardy. To protect Americans' economic interests, survival needs, and stability, this bill is necessary. Senator Yoon champions the most important argument in this debate, the idea that there are fundamental flaws with the GILTI tax. Senator Marwaha did a great job unpacking why this isn't a huge issue, but I still acknowledge that the GILTI tax isn't our best option. No one argues that. But even if Senator Marwaha didn't mention the reforms, you haven't provided an alternative tax that makes more sense than the tax on big tech, which prevents them from abusing power. And when we're presented with much bigger impacts like complete shutdowns of our infrastructure and hospitals, we have to affirm to help Americans, to help our constituents. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nowinski, for that speech of 2 minutes and 46 seconds. We're now going to move into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, raise your placards. That goes first to you.
Yeah, I think the chair. What we're wondering is why a tax that charges like 80 million elderly and retired citizens out of their only bank balance is somehow a better world than a world with literally any other tax that doesn't charge these elderly Americans. Like, I mean, I don't need to provide. Yeah.
Flawed, but as Senator Marwaha mentioned, we are putting in reforms to stop it. And while tax reforms have been very slow, I don't see there being like
80 million people suffering over 8 years is like just like an objectively bad thing to do. And like you guys are asking me for a counter model. There's like,
you want another block?
Yeah, actually I do.
Okay, go ahead.
Wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, again, like I know I haven't given you a counter model, but there are like hundreds of other taxes that you can do without charging elderly Americans, right?
Well, yes, but the GILTI tax especially is significantly special because it taxes big tech, right? It taxes these companies.
It taxes all foreign corporations. It taxes all U.S. corporations in foreign countries. Why don't you just tax like U.S. corporations at home through a different mechanism, especially big tech?
Well, because it's also good to deter companies from, going out.
I'm not saying you shouldn't have GITLI. I'm just saying you shouldn't increase it by 50% and charge.
Thank you. More. That was enough. Call for an ag. Ag speakers, Gutierrez, you have the floor.
I thank the chair, for the judges, and everyone else in the chamber. Senator Gutierrez, Gutierrez. Just whenever you're ready. Awesome. Is the presiding officer ready? Oh, perfect. Let's get started. In the myth of Icarus, a boy tries to escape the island by flying a horse with wings. And Icarus is told by his father that if he flies too close to the sun, he will crash and die. But despite this warning, Icarus soared higher in the sky, ignoring his father's warning and falling to his death. But this piece of legislation flies a bit too close to that danger. Let's heed our warnings before we fall to our own demise and negate. Let's make one distinction clear in this debate. We all agree we need to fund cybersecurity. This debate doesn't centralize around the merits of funding it. But I'd argue then this debate crystallizes to one contention. Is the GITLI tax, the mechanism used to fund it, a good idea? Absolutely not. So let's first see what raising this tax actually implies, because no one's brought this up so far. This GITLI tax being raised to 21% doesn't mean that it actually charges at 21%. That's the statutory rate. The effective rate companies actually pay is higher, and that's because JITLI embeds double taxation in the tax code. The Wall Street Journal reports on April 5th of 2021 that raising the statutory rate to 21% would end up increasing that effective rate to 26.25%. That means that effective rate is nearly doubled under this legislation, and that further Senator Yoon's impact about how people's retirements are affected because they end up paying more. But Senator Carroll, Wilkes, Nowinski, and Marwaha all tell you this is a good idea for different reasons. Let's explore them. First, Senator Carroll tells you the JITLI tax is good because it's a stable source. But even if this is true, Senator Yoon already explained who it comes at the expense at. The elderly, because their retirement's unfairly targeted. But next, Senator Wilkes, Marwaha, and Nowinski told you that this legislation impacts big tech. They tell you it's a good idea. I'd argue it's just as disastrous. Here's the thing. Digital platforms, tools, and marketplaces from big tech help small businesses start, grow, and succeed. And that digital advertising helps small companies find new customers cost efficiently. In fact, the Connected Commerce Council reports in 2019 that 85% of small businesses report that the digital tools they're using have helped their small businesses in some way. Under this legislation, you increase the payroll of big tech, making it more expensive to keep those services and just siphoning it on to small business. Senator Marwaha, you just hurt those small businesses instead. But why is this so important? Sally Lochner of Fundera on September 9th of 2020 reports that small businesses comprise a whopping 99.9% of all United States businesses. And the Small Business Administration furthers in 2019 that they're the result of 44% of economic activity in the US, and they employ just under half of the private workforce. Small businesses are vital to our economy. Senator Wilkes, Dhingra, and Zhang, all the problems you talk about with security, Senator Yoon told you we can legislate against it. The problem is when we further burden them and effectively double JITLI tax and affect the people we don't need to. This legislation flies a little too close to the sun. Let's heed the warnings before we fail. Negate.
Thank you, Senator Gutierrez, for a speech of 3 minutes and 2 seconds. Now moving into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please raise your placards. That will go first to Zhang.
Hi.
Hi, Senator. Exactly how much does big tech spend on these small businesses currently?
They spend a lot right now.
Yeah, so if big tech has already been paying taxes and they've also been fined a lot, how do you know that this new tax will actually inhibit big tech's ability to fund
if
these
you've raised the cost it takes for that, they want to keep those profit margins, so you just siphon it onto small businesses that are paying for those services.
But doesn't big tech in the status quo have a ton of resources? The
goal for them is to make money. That's the point of any corporation.
But then wouldn't they still have that?
No.
Vemulapalli.
Hi.
Senator, I just want to clarify real quick. What exactly does this bill do to hurt small businesses?
I mean, it raises the JITLI tax, which means that these big tech corporations that small businesses rely on just pass on those costs onto them.
Right. But these like multinational corporations are typically the ones like overseas, as Senator Wilkes was talking about. Are small businesses able to
it's generally big tech that small businesses use those technologies.
Yeah,
right. But small businesses still use their technologies. They're still being impacted under this legislation.
Yeah, so companies like Google, Apple, who are offshoring right now, how would this bill affect them? And
because it raises their payroll, they pass that cost on to small businesses.
Since that was a negative speech, our final aft speech, affirmative speakers, please rise. Vemulapalli, you have the floor.
I thank the chair. This is Senator Vemulapalli speaking for the first time in this legislative session. I'm just going to assume everyone's ready, just in the interest of time, and I'll get started. Just give me a verbal indication if otherwise. Okay. For too long, our Congress has committed itself to rhetoric over reality, to pretty sounding over pragmatic policies. We strive for lofty ideals in the name of moving our country forward, but forget who we leave behind. Don't let democracy be destroyed by the dollar that defines it. Now, this piece of legislation may seem complicated at first, but I want to be the first to go down the line and explain why each part benefits our most vulnerable constituents. Pass this legislation for the small businesses that define this country. Let's first understand how small businesses are struggling in the status quo. Axios found that 1/3 of small businesses and half of small business minority owners can't even pay rent, especially during COVID. In a country founded on helping everyday citizens, it's ironic that we're silent for small businesses. But as we crystallize this debate, it's clear the main negative story revolves around why the GILTI tax is bad. Let me break the gridlock and definitively prove otherwise. Only big corporations are the ones that are able to outshore and have the assets to set up bases abroad, since it costs lawyers and billions of dollars to go abroad. Smaller businesses aren't able to do that, which means the main group we are taxing are large corporations, not small businesses, Senator Gutierrez. That's why we tax guilty in the first place, Senator Yoon, to keep profits in America and not offshore. The guilty tax already exists right now, so your argument is non-unique. More importantly, this bill spends 50% of the money gained from this tax on cyber defenses. And according to ScoScan Help, large Fortune 500 companies have the budget for comprehensive cybersecurity, which is why hackers typically target small businesses for a gateway to these large corporations. But when we spend billions of dollars to help cyber defenses, this would include small businesses who are most vulnerable now. With stronger defenses and a lower likelihood of being hacked, small businesses are now able to compete with large corporations, and that reduces cyber attacks from Russia, like Senator Dhingra said. But why is it so important to help small businesses? Small Biz Trends writes in 2020 that small businesses employ roughly 50% of the American workforce, or 60 million Americans. Right now, those jobs have and will be lost in the pandemic. Tens of millions of livelihoods. That's the largest impact we've heard today. But giving small businesses an upper edge prevents at least thousands of them from falling into poverty. Because when we let money do the talking, we silence the voices of those without it. This isn't a hypothetical attack, it's real life. And it's shameful that at the end of this debate, I have to be the first senator to actually compare both affirmative and negative impacts. Senator Pradhan, even if cybersecurity threats exist in both worlds, only by affirming can you help small businesses defend their tech. And Senator Sinha, you're worried about if we solve cybersecurity, but the affirmative is the only side to take a step to actually do something about Russia. As this debate ends, keep in mind, for a child who goes to bed hungry because their family's small business shut down, and the men who put your name on their ballot, trusting you to make the right choice, pass this legislation for debt.
Thank you, Senator Vemalapati, for the speech of 3 minutes and 3 seconds. On to 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please rise. That goes first to Gutierrez, then Yoon.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. I think you misunderstood my point. Right? Small businesses use big tech's like programs, right?
Yeah, they use big tech programs, but the problem with small businesses right now is they aren't able to compete with large corporations, especially during the pandemic.
Small businesses depend on big tech because so much of the revenue comes from those platforms. When you make those more expensive, how can small businesses afford it?
I wouldn't say small businesses depend on big tech. Essentially, right now, large corporations are the ones who are cutting off prices for.
I gave you a card that says that 85% of small businesses report their digital use have shaped their business.
I give you evidence large corporations were the ones who be taxed. Small businesses.
But the programs are what shapes for business.
Policy, Senator Yoon, that goes to Senator Pradhan.
You responded to my argument regarding how the United States should not attack or violate the treaty. What was the argument that you said?
Right, so I did a little bit of a comparative weighing, right? Even if like either way in each world, if cybersecurity threats may still exist from Russia, at least by affirming you're able to help small businesses, because first of all, they wouldn't be taxing much, and second of all,
but wouldn't attacking Russia cause an equal effect on our nation?
I'd say we've already.
Thank you. Perfect. Okay, we'll skip the procedure. Everyone spoke. We'll move to voting. People want to pass the bill. Raise your placards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You want to fail? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Under 7 to 5, this bill is passed. Congratulations to the sponsor. Recess motion. Let's see it. Marwaha.
Seeing a break in debate, I move to a 10-minute recess in-house.
In-house would mean videos on. So
sorry, yeah.
Not in-house. 10-minute recess, you said?
Yeah.
Seconds. Are all of our judges okay with doing 10 minutes? It's good with everyone? The plan was to give everyone a second speech. Yes, Senator. So, okay, perfect. 10-minute recess then. Get back by 4:03 Central Time.
We take a quick split on mental health before we all do.
That's a based idea.
That's probably a good idea.
A very good idea.
Alrighty, so if y'all got
just want to make sure. I saw Judge Potlaw coming in and out a little bit. Are you all set now? Okay.
Yep, I'm all good.
Perfect. About 30 seconds left. Waiting on Z and Yoon. Perfect. Okay. So call the session back into order. Everyone's back, like 10 seconds early. I will now move on to our next bill for debate, bill regarding mental health. Definitely no authors, so sponsorship, please raise your placard. That goes to Pradhan unopposed.
All right, my name is Representative Pradhan, which is again spelled as Pradhan, and this is my second speech in this legislative chamber. First speech on the bill, authorships bill on the bill about mental health. When all the judges and the presiding officer and the parliamentarian are ready, just give me a thumbs up. All right. Starting 3, 2. I thought everything was my fault and I was just defective and bad, and that was what I deserved from life. I missed out on social life and extracurricular activities because I struggled with acute feelings of social anxiety, self-hatred, and fear. These are the words of an anonymous student, those found on their suicide note. This is no single student. There are millions of anonymous students in the United States that suffered the same fate. It is time for this chamber to take action and stand in solidarity with countless suffering from the same mental strains by siding with the strongest affirmation. Primarily, mental health has become a major issue in US schools. As America's health rankings highlights, risk factors associated with suicide among adolescents include psychiatric disorders, such as major depressive, bipolar, conduct, and substance use disorders. Psychiatric comorbidity, especially the combination of mood, disruptive and substance abuse disorders, family history of depression or suicide, loss of a parent to death or divorce, physical and or sexual abuse, lack of a support network, feeling of social isolation and bullying. The prevalence of attempting suicide amongst most adolescents is higher in females compared with males, although males are more likely to die by suicide. Second, non-Hispanic Black high school student than non-Hispanic white high school schoolers. Students who identified as being gay, lesbian, bisexual compared with students who identified as heterosexual. Addressing mental health is necessary in order to save the lives of countless minority and several students in our nation. Further, we must understand this. First, we must understand that help to students in the early stages of mental health this bill provides can effectively help curtail these suicide rates. As Vantage Point reports, one specific area of improvement for teachers is the level of training they receive regarding mental health disabilities among students, recognizing the difference between bad behavior and mental health issues, recognizing warning signs, connecting the students to resources, and working with parents. By doing so, teachers can help the students feel more welcome and encourage them to learn, help parents feel confident in where they are sending their child for a proper education, and the teacher to feel confident in how to handle children with problems. Additionally, this bill also provides for effective responses to students with mental health signs. Teachers need to know that in order to improve the mental health of students. Essentially, this bill also provides a key solvency mechanism that allows students to gain significant improvements in mental health access. As USA News explains, 1/5 of students report cases of mental health illness. However, by employing professionals to improve anxiety training and recognition of these illnesses, that number can fall significantly. Teachers saw a decrease in conflict among students, and family members reported the children as having less anxiety at home. Overall, teachers have a huge impact on each child they teach. Thus, in order to avoid the loss of life of another innocent anonymous student, I humbly request every single senator in this chamber to vote in the strongest affirmation. This is not a question of pass or fail. It is a question of life or death. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pradhan, for that speech of 3 minutes and 6 seconds. Now moving into 4 blocks for direct questioning. Questioners, please raise your placards. That'll go first to Gutierrez, then Carol, then Vemlapalli, then Zhang.
Thank you. Hi, Senator. So Section 1, who funds and administers the program?
This bill essentially works through local school districts where the state
Right,
essentially goes to the
exactly.
federal.
Local school districts, right? So what's stopping a local school district from taking this mental health training and funding it towards stuff that would be more damaging towards students?
Let's look at the third section. Essentially, there's basically a section that basically says if students,
The only
districts don't
way that they
engage in this.
comply is if they don't give the funding in the first place. What's stopping them from actually like
Carol?
I thank the chair. Hi, Senator. How is a 2-week training going to fully help these children be cared for?
Of course, it won't fully help. I'm not arguing that it's going to fully solve for all the issues of mental health. I'm arguing that we take a right step towards this. And if we teach teachers the right signs of mental health issues, we can effectively solve for several problems.
How are the teachers going to effectively work with these children to make their mental health better? How are they going to do that with this 2-week training?
This 2-week training provides several metrics. One of these metrics is essentially
Hello,
a testament to identifying disorders.
Hi, Senator. So could you read section 2C of this legislation for me? It essentially talks about tier 1 schools, right?
Yes.
What exactly are tier 1 schools?
Tier 1 schools are essentially those with like low income status overall.
Okay, so why is it important to only focus on that and not all schools that could especially be that won't be able to supply all the mental health treatment?
The thing with tier 1 schools is they have a large proportion of minority students, and as I explained, those students face the largest risk from mental health diseases. We can effectively solve for those students and this criteria.
But what about the ones who will lose their funding if they don't have enough money?
Since that was a speech and affirmation, I'll call for our first negation speech. Negative speakers, please raise your placards.
A point of inquiry.
Yeah.
I believe I had the last question.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Going off of the previous line of questioning, Senator, do wealthy schools also qualify as Title I schools?
No, not wealthy schools don't necessarily qualify, but what we're doing over here is that essentially by providing so this money is going to Title I schools, of course, but we're taking an approach on improving the status of those schools, and wealthy schools can be of course added through future bills, but in the status quo, we're considering improving the lives of several low-income schools and the students in those schools.
Okay, and is Title I effective in providing funds?
Thank you.
Title I, yes,
Apologies
it is
for the little
effective.
issue there.
It's being
That was a speech
overseen.
and affirmation. Negative speakers, please raise your placard. That goes to Carol unopposed.
I thank the chair. This is Representative Carroll speaking for the second time in today's legislation. If anybody needs a minute. All right, I will be timing myself on my phone. Thank you. My elementary and middle school's district slogan is "the focus is on the child," which in schools it most certainly is, and this includes mental health awareness. And while this bill is trying to help with such problems, there are better things that can be done instead of training teachers. So senators, negate today for 2 reasons. 1, this bill is trying to do something, but there are better ways to move forward in trying to help students' mental health. And 2, there is plenty of training already similar to this. First, vulnerable kids need consistency, a settled environment, and someone who takes the time to know and understand them, which, don't get me wrong, teachers are great at, but teachers have to tend to hundreds of kids every day. These schools need to use this funding and hire a psychiatrist who is going to take time to assess what these kids need, or be open to children coming in and talking about the issues that they're going through. This way that they are getting professional help. Most schools share social workers and psychiatrists between districts. One person to multiple schools isn't doing any good. We could use this money for giving the children the best help possible. Teenagers are going through what will be the biggest physical and mental change they will ever experience in their lives. It is always a good idea to have a counselor or psychologist on campus ready to give the support they may not get at home. Senator Pradhan is completely right. What you're saying is heartbreaking, and it is important to care for these children, but this chamber will understand that training is going to do little to help. Teachers have a huge impact, but their impact should be more directly focused on the education part of their job rather than doing something that a trained professional is paid to do. But second, the amount of training teachers are going through already is a list that is incredibly long and includes courses on such topics already. I myself have worked in an instructional practices class for the last 2 years. We see mandatory training logs. Some training courses include, and which vary from district to district, but are not limited to things such as student mental health, awareness, intervention and referral, child abuse reporting information, health emergencies, trauma-informed care, and grief training, and even youth suicide awareness, prevention, and postvention. All these together are what's going to be included in those 2 weeks. are countless other trainings that teachers go through. And while teachers go through this training, we can't expect them to be able to do what Section 2A is requiring when, according to goodtherapy.org, it takes a certified psychiatrist 12 years to be able to diagnose somebody with a mental illness. Some children hide or discard their mental issues, including depression and anxiety, eating disorders, and the ways that mental health is handled inside of schools is more babysitting than actual help. So senators, if you wish to actually help these children with their mental health and for something to be done, we need to negate today. This bill isn't going far enough, and we can all speak from experience that mental health is vital, especially in a young person's life. Getting through school and friendships and even relationships that we're starting to break into, we're going to experience the depression and the anxiety. So if you wish to do something effective, negate today so we can actually help these students get somewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Carroll, for that speech of 3 minutes and 3 seconds. Now moving into 4 blocks of questioning. Questioners, raise your placards. That will go first to Sinha.
Hi, Senator. So I agree with you that students need a stable environment when it comes to mental health checkups, but shouldn't we pass because we need teachers to identify if there are any warning signals for any mental health struggles in students?
Teachers already go through enough training to be prepared to identify mental health issues. I personally myself have teachers who have pulled me aside to ask if I was all right and have referred me to a counselor. This training already...
If it was enough, then we wouldn't be seeing like these high suicide rates.
You can't assume that every teacher is going to respond with this training.
Make it better with this bill.
Hi, Representatives. So what is the net harm in passing? I understand that this is not the perfect solution by any means.
There's much better ways that this money could be allocated. We could help kids way more if we have this specific psychiatrist or psychologist at a school or a counselor who's not focused on directly getting these kids into college.
So the worst thing that happens in the negation, the affirmation world is we waste money, correct?
I have said that I have agreed, but there's much better alternatives to making this bill effective.
Why can't we do the alternatives as well? What's stopping us from doing both things? I agree with you.
Thank you.
All right, going off what Senator Marwah has said, exactly. When we have options to alternatives that don't directly contradict this bill, what is the net harm essentially going through with this bill?
I have already, this money that is being produced from this bill and given to these districts to make sure that these children's mental health is okay is already happening in other training, and we don't need to add another 2-week training on top of everything that teachers go through. I've seen teachers, I practice in a class myself. This training.
Indra.
Hi, Representative. You advocate for this replacement of having psychiatrists and doctors. In comparison to the plethora of teachers that we have in our education system, how many psychiatrists do we have?
There are psychiatrists per district?
I'm just asking, okay, you've just said the worst thing that can happen is cost, increasing or whatnot. So what I'm trying to say is if we have many teachers as a whole, what is the harm in educating these teachers when obviously there's less psychiatrists?
They're already educated through other trainings by hiring a psychiatrist or a psychologist. We're making sure that these children are tended to.
Why do we have the highest suicide
rates? Thank you. Since that was the speech of negation, all affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. All speakers on the affirmation, that goes to Senator Zhang.
I thank the chair. Hello, my name is Senator Zhang, speaking for the second time this session. At the leisure of all those above me, please give me any indication and I'll begin. Okay, great. Education and mental health go hand in hand. Education is the great equalizer between students, and mental health is the step that all students must take and protect in order to do well in school and do well in life. But COVID has caused problems for education and for the mental health of our students. We pass today in order to allow our students the resiliency to bounce back from this pandemic and back to learning and maintaining their own health. First, let's understand that schools desperately need aid because COVID has strained state budgets ever more than before. Representative Gutierrez asked our sponsor today where this money is coming from and where the money to fund this 2-week training is coming from. It's coming from local schools and their local governments, but their budgets are being strained by COVID. And those are the governments that are hit hardest by this pandemic. According to the New York Times, in September 2020, collectively, state governments will have budget shortfalls of $312 billion through the end of this summer. When local governments are factored in, the shortfall rises to $500 billion. Without federal aid, some of the biggest cuts will be to education. Schools don't have the resources for education in the status quo. So they don't even have the resources for mental health training and mental health protection for our students. Senator Carroll, even before pandemic, schools were struggling to stay afloat, and now they don't have the money for mental health training. But this bill will fund that training, and this bill will help our students get back on their feet. And that's important because second, this bill will help relieve mental barriers imposed by the pandemic on our students. This pandemic has clearly made an impact on every single aspect of the lives of our students. How life was in March last year is completely different than what it's like now, especially in school and family and in these students' families. According to the US National Library of Medicine in November of 2020, based on the questionnaires completed by the parents, findings reveal that students felt uncertain, fearful, and isolated during current times. It was also shown that children experienced disturbed sleep, nightmares, poor appetite, agitation, inattention, and separation anxiety. So severe psychological conditions that adults face are what our students face right now due to this pandemic. And Senator Carroll, I understand that in the most ideal world, we'd have therapists and psychiatrists in these schools, but these schools can't afford those in the status quo. But if we fund them, we give schools the training and we give teachers the training to identify these mental health issues in our students and make sure that our students can go forward away from this pandemic with confidence and not carry the burdens that this pandemic has left on them. Let's prepare our students for a future where they don't have to worry about not having a teacher there to support them, where they don't have to worry about failing classes or feeling hopeless. Let's pass today.
Thank you, Senator Zhang, for that speech of 3 minutes. Oh, did someone just leave? Just want to make sure it wasn't one of our judges.
I think it was Jimmy's second Zoom account. Oh wait, no, I see two of them. Never mind. I don't know.
Wait, yeah. We gotta count 1 judge, 2 judge, 3, 4. Oh, is our Parley still here? Oh, there he is. Yeah, okay. All of our judges are still here. Must have just been a competitor spectator. Okay, wonderful. We'll now move into questioning. All questioners, please raise your placards. That goes first to Carol.
I thank the chair. Hi, Senator. So can't this money be used to hire psychiatrists so students can get real professional help? Making sure children's mental health is okay is not the teacher's job. So why don't we hire somebody that's going to do an effective job?
Because schools don't have the money currently, and
but getting the money from this bill, we can just reallocate the money to make sure that they're going to get real professional help.
Yeah, we can help them through that way.
So why wouldn't we?
Okay, because we would fund this bill, and then we would be able to fund mental health in schools, and we would be able to help our students.
Well,
if teachers are trained on mental health, kids will go to teachers instead of counselors more often, right?
Teachers are the first line that students are able to talk to. So if they first go to their teachers and their teacher sees something wrong, they can always refer them to a counselor. But having that teacher as the first step is the most important.
Why are teachers comparatively better than counselors?
Teachers see these students on a day-to-day basis. And I'm not saying that teachers and counselors are better or one is better or not, but I'm saying that teachers have more exposure to these students, and so they should be able to
identify. Are under a lot of pressure. Why is putting more pressure instead of just letting counselors deal with that a good idea?
Because teachers are the first line, and they can direct these students to counselors if they
Thank you. Since that was an F, we'll move to a neg. Neg speakers, please raise your placards. That will go to Vemla Pali unopposed.
I thank the chair. That's Senator Vemla Pali speaking for the second and likely final time in this legislative session. Like I said last time, I'm just going to assume everyone's ready and get started. Americans are often promised to take the chance when opportunity knocks. But for too long, this Congress hasn't opened the door for opportunities when those knocking face mental or psychological problems. The opportunities needed for someone to succeed and survive in life. Let's not knock down those who are already fallen, negate to protect them. I want to clarify, I'm not speaking on the negation because I believe mental health isn't a serious issue, but because it is an important issue, we must go about it in a near perfect way. Fail this legislation for the survival of public schools. Let's first understand how much public schools are already struggling in the status quo. According to the union leader, grades haven't been worse for students in years, with about 1/3 of students getting Fs in the spring. There are multiple reasons for this, including 20% of teachers quitting and reductions in lunch meals affecting their students. However, as most schools are set back to be in person next fall, we are heading in the right direction. But this bill closes that opportunity. But I want to distance myself from Senator Curl and prove the harm this bill proposes, the disadvantage, not just how it isn't perfect. I want to direct our attention to Section 2C. We give $500 million of subsidies to Title I or lower income schools. But Senator Zhang, this is nowhere near enough, and that's a major problem. The National Center for Education Strategies finds that there's only 46,000 Title I schools. What does this mean? Well, according to the London School of Health, it would cost at least $2,000 per teacher for a course, a manual, and an entire program for them, as proven through empirical studies in England and Wales. Now imagine a public school in a low-income neighborhood being forced to train dozens of teachers, costing tens of thousands of dollars. Now, this may not seem like an issue, but if you look to Section 2B, which says if a school doesn't give every teacher training, that school loses 30% of their funding. $500 million may seem like a lot of money, but when there's 50,000 vulnerable Title I schools, it's close to nothing. While back in high school, I always wanted to destroy my school. That would end up causing catastrophic effects because the Education Trust Foundation found in 2020 that the majority of public schools are on their last legs, barely even being able to afford funding on their own. Each Title I school will need much more than $10,000 each, enough for only 5 teachers. But the worst part is that this 30% funding cuts and hurts minorities and low-income Americans the most. I understand the affirmation's concerns in improving mental health, but I draw the line when it's the most vulnerable constituents that are hurt. Senator saying, if you really cared about these schools' funding, then you wouldn't feel the need to cut their funding. Imagine a student only getting meals at school twice a week. Imagine a teacher being forced to work 12 hours a day for extra classes. And imagine a student not even being able to afford a notebook for their math class. Only by affirming, we can open the school doors to a life of opportunities.
Thank you, Senator Venulapati, for that speech of 3 minutes and 4 seconds. Moving into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please raise your placards. Goes to first, Marwaha.
Hi, Senator. So I understand that this program will be expensive. So doesn't today's legislation give time for these schools to prepare for this payment?
I don't understand what you mean by time. I already proved to you that these schools are on their last legs. They're barely able to afford lunch meals for their students, barely able to afford like notebooks, these basic necessities.
Right. So, but certainly some of this can be chalked up to the COVID-19 pandemic. This legislation goes up to it goes into effect in 2023. They'll have time to recover by then, correct?
That's my point, though. It's going to be especially hard for these Title I schools because they're in low-income neighborhoods and don't get as much federal funding.
So you're saying Title I schools are struggling right now, so they can't pay for training, right?
It's not just that they're struggling right now, but that the funding we try to give them is also not enough because it only affords for like 5 teachers, proven through empirical studies.
$500 million isn't enough money for you?
It's 50,000 Title I schools that we have to afford. That's only 10,000 each, and if each training like manual course,
it's still something. Like they're still going to. It's still cheaper than them to like take a 30% like loss, right?
I'd argue that it's more important to not have that 30% loss because they're already on their last legs. If they use their federal funding,
Thank you.
Schools save
that
money.
Was a negative speech. We'll now call for a speech in the affirmation. Affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. That goes first to Yoon.
I thank the chair for the recognition. That's Senator Yoon speaking for the last time in this session and possibly the last time this summer. We'll see how it goes. Is anybody not ready at this point in the debate? Splendid, wonderful, beautiful. All right, I will begin my time. All too often in this Congress, we tend to look at the lives and livelihoods of our constituents as facts and figures, but doing that takes away the voices of the unheard, diminishes the opinions of those most expressive, and cuts off the needs of the low-income students who are in desperate need of mental health services. So before you go to cast your ballot today, keep this one question in mind. Who are you voting for? Pass. To begin the end game, the first issue is this legislation necessary? And the answer to this lies within the status quo. Turn to the CDC, which explains in March 2021 that at the height of the pandemic, nearly 2.4 million of our students across this country faced depression. But further, this legislation for once gets help to those students because, as the CDC furthers, the only effective way of meeting this issue head on is to get these people professional help, which is literally this bill. Crucially, Senator Marwaha, this is the perfect solution. Why? Because the CDC finds that while professionals can help these kids, there just isn't a way in the status quo to consistently get them to see these professionals. That's why Section 2 of this legislation tells us that teachers will be trained to, quote, identify warning signs of mental illness and learn the appropriate step to take when a student requires assistance. That's why you pass, because you get rid of the problem at its root. But let's move on to the concerns of the negation. First, Senator Carroll, you began your last speech talking about criminal minds, but the only thing criminal in this debate is the logical inconsistency in your argument, and it puts a lot on my mind to know that you would prioritize semantics over virtues. On a purely principled and profiled front, I've given you evidence that these teachers obviously aren't going to become psychiatrists. Instead, this helps to recognize students who need help to apply intervention appropriately. Your concern is as lifeless as Aaron Hotchner's wife. After Senator Wilkes, you seem to know as much about Title I schools as I do about talking to girls. Not much. Understand that teachers aren't applying psychological health care. They're identifying students to pass on to the counselors, as this bill says. Then Senator Vemulapalli, you ought to go bird watching because your argument on getting into every school instead of Title I schools is like a fat hummingbird. While it sounds good, it just doesn't fly principally on two fronts. First, turn to The Atlantic in January 2016, which explains that low-income students are, quote, highly disproportionately affected by mental health issues because of home stability. But second, if you really want to help everyone, write another bill. And as Congress, if we need more money, we can allocate it based on the audits that we get from the departments we delegate this work to. I was once told by a great retired senator by the name of Nicholas Raffinengo that the forefront of this Congress's focus ought to be on those who need it the most. And echoing that notion, on the virtual campus of Princeton University just last December, a great retired senator by the name of Parthiban once opposed my legislation by telling me that this Congress is for the people and by the people. So I challenge my colleagues, who are you voting for? Because I'm voting for and working for those of our people who need it the most, the 2.4 million disaffected students who are drowning. Don't pull their lifeline.
Thank you, Senator Yoon, for that speech of 3 minutes and 2 seconds. Now moving into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please raise your placards. We'll start with Vemulapalli, then Dhingra.
Hi, Senator. Great and funny speech. I'm just wondering how much it costs for each teacher to get training.
Okay, right. So I don't think like every teacher in the world needs training, right? But at the same time, like I just think like one teacher per student needs to identify that concern. But not only that,
Isn't that what this bill says?
If you need more money, right? If you need more money, we can allocate more money as we go to save the lives of these students.
Right, but in the time like between then, we don't know how much these schools need because these lower income
we get
schools,
audits like from like our departments, right? The United States Department
how
of
do we
Health and
ensure
Human
that these
Services.
lower income like tier 1 schools aren't going to lose all their funding?
Hi, Representative. Good speech. So this bill talks about instituting the program every single year. Would we be allocating $500 million every single year to this program? And also, what's the guarantee that schools, even with this funding, are able to deliver on time? Because otherwise, 30% of their funding literally gets cut out.
Okay, right. So again, if these schools voice a tangible concern to our U.S. Department of Health, which I trust very much because I literally confirmed those people, then they'll return those audits and tell us we need more money. Congress tends to underfund things a lot. We always just deliver like a few months later by funding it again.
So you're just saying
semantic argument.
Thank you. Since that was a speech on affirmation, negative speakers, please raise your placards. That goes to Gutierrez, unopposed.
I thank the chair for the judges and everyone else in the chamber, but Senator Gutierrez, G-U-T-I-E-R-R-E-Z, speaking for probably the final time this legislative session. I don't know how I'm going to follow up that speech, but I guess I'll try. As always, please just give me any indication. All right, awesome. In 1516, English philosopher Thomas More wrote the book Utopia, depicting the lives of civilians on an island of perfection and idealism. And in that book, The citizens work to create an ideal society and way of life. But this legislation only turns the utopian concept into a dystopian reality we must negate. First, let me make something clear. Everyone in this chamber agrees. More mental health training is not exactly a bad thing, but let me separate myself from Senator Carroll on my own side. Just because there might be better ways to fund it and a lot of mental health training in the status quo doesn't mean we shouldn't try to help people. And Senator Pradhan, if the schools can't afford it, we can give them more money. Here's the problem. When it comes to mental health, we need to do it right, especially when lives are on the line. But this legislation gets it all wrong. Senator Pradhan tells you how public schools can't afford this increase, but let me target the care itself. You fail this legislation solely because this care only hurts students' mental health, not helps it. Senator Pradhan, you say that the legislation helps students because it helps teachers recognize mental health problems. Here's the thing, that argument hinges on the premise that teachers actually end up giving the correct care. The reality is they won't. Look at section 2. Mandates. Schools are going to take care of this training. Senator Zhang, that's incredibly problematic because even more than that, it provides no mechanism whatsoever for the government to actually oversee this training or step in the event that they're not doing it right. That's fundamentally problematic. As the Hettinger report reports on February 2nd, 2021, in an ideal world, all schools and students would maintain their objectivity and not impose their personal views, especially on mental health when it comes to students. But that rarely ever happens. Nothing stops these teachers from forcing reviews onto students. But even more than that, these local schools are the only influence on who trains these teachers. Nothing stops them from using this funding for the wrong reasons. Students going to teachers when they need help the most will now be at the mercy of the ideologies of local schools. But Senator Pradhan tries to refute this argument in cross-examination by citing Section 2B, where any school that doesn't comply loses 30% of their funding under the ESSA. But all they need to do to meet this requirement is provide the training, period. It doesn't have to be helpful training, effective training, or good. They just have to provide it. Not only does this disprove Senator Pradhan, Zhang, and Yoon's argument about students getting care, actually becomes considerably worse. I'd argue the only thing that's worse than no care is getting the wrong care. Senator Marwaha, here's the net harm you asked for. Greenbrook Neural Health Centers explains in 2020 that when people get treated for clinical depression incorrectly, it robs you of your relationships and work life, leads to illness and substance abuse. But more than that, it leads to suicides. All of us agree mental health needs to be a top priority, but we need to get it right because students' lives are on the line. When we get it wrong, all it leads to is more suffering. Please, I beg this Congress, don't turn student lives into dystopia. Negate.
Thank you, Senator Gutierrez, for that speech of 3 minutes and 5 seconds. We'll now move into 2 blocks of direct questioning. Questioners, please raise your placards. That goes first to Marwaha and then Wilkes.
Hi.
Hi, so I agree that in the status quo, things like anxiety and depression exist. And you tell us that when people are wrongly diagnosed, these things pop up again. So what's changing?
I mean, I'm saying that you're giving money to these local schools who will just use it to promote their ideologies when it comes to mental health and whatnot. Like that becomes more problematic for students because you're not just getting no care, they're getting wrong care.
Okay, but in the status quo, they have mental health issues, and then after getting wrong
that
healthcare,
wrong care damages their mental health even more because now schools are promoting.
So isn't it trained mental health counselors looking over the training for teachers?
I mean, local school districts decide who those are.
No, this is actually
under
delegated
Section
from
2.
the federal government on Section 2A. It says
mandates
federal
that local schools take care of the training.
No, it says that they'll have trained medical health counselors delegated from the federal government.
Right, and local schools decide who those are. As a result, that's where you see all the impacts pertaining to actually increase mental health problems.
Say that the schools will choose?
It says in Section 2.
Thank you. Since that was a speech in negation, affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. That goes to Wilkes, unopposed.
Hi again. Wilkes, W-I-L-K-E-S. Let me know if there's any information you need. Looks like we're good. I'll go ahead and get started. Personally, I think learning is something this Congress should do more of. Whether it's mental health, cybersecurity, or something in between, we like to throw around statistics but forget all of the meaning behind people's stories. So for the next 3 minutes, I'm no longer Senator Wilkes. I'm Professor Wilkes. Let me show you why this bill gets an A+. First off, I want to deal with the main negation advocacy so far. They're making the same mistake they've made last debate. If we constantly fail bills because they could do more or there's a better alternative out there, we won't ever get anything done. Make the negation outweigh mental health for them to come anywhere close to winning. So instead, pass this bill to decrease teacher turnover rates. Now, under the status quo, teachers are leaving their job at a high rate than almost every other job sector. The Carnegie Learning Solution quantifies on July 29th of 2019, the annual teacher turnover rate is 16%. But why is this? Mental health is a driving factor. The International Board of Education found on March 27, 2019, that teacher turnover is tied to not just poor mental health in students, causing an unsatisfactory classroom environment, but teachers themselves aren't prepared to handle their own mental health issues. That's exactly why I'm passing this bill. It fixes both of these issues by first training teachers to handle students, and if you don't buy into the defensive arguments of the negation, teachers can learn about their own mental health and how to handle it when going to training, even if it only helps students marginally. Senator Carroll, you say this bill hurts teachers. I firmly disagree. Mills School of Education corroborates in 2021 that because of these two warrants, mental health training for teachers has been associated with significant decreases in teacher turnover and burnout. That means teachers are doing a better job and are staying in their job in the world of the affirmative. Why is decreasing teacher turnover the most important impact in this debate? First, this reduces dropout rates because teacher turnover in the status quo is directly correlated to worse education. The American Educational Research Journal deciphers in a meta-study that schools with high teacher turnover rates saw dropout rates increase significantly. That's so important because the Child Fund charity explains that dropping out of high school increases the chance of staying in poverty by 600%. Second, this turns Senator Vemelopoulos' argument about public schools because when they have to hire more teachers, they have to spend more money. The Learning Policy Institute writes in September of 2018 that each new hire costs low-income school districts an extra $20,000 in expenses related to teacher requirement, student support systems, and physical resources. When you reduce costs for schools, you allow them to spend more money on more mental health resources, acting as another link to improved mental health. For any negation speaker to refute this argument, make them deal with all of those warrants. Providing mental health resources isn't just a good idea, it's a moral necessity. Show your constituents you're someone they can count on. Class dismissed.
Thank you, Senator Wilkes, for that speech of 3 minutes and 2 seconds. Moving into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please raise your flashers. Carol?
I thank the chair. Hi, Senator. Like you mentioned in your speech, this chamber is focused on alternatives, but teachers already have training similar to this. So what's to say that this bill ensures that anything's going to be any different?
Not even close to the truth, like at all. There's no federal requirement at all.
There's no I train in a teaching class myself. I see the training logs. Teachers already have.
Just because it happens in your school does not mean it's a federal wide. Like that's something.
I've lived in multiple states, so I've seen it multiple times.
That's just like not true. I mean, I can read you evidence that says like that's just.
I could show you evidence as well. I mean, it's a thing.
You did not read a single piece of evidence talking about a federal mandate.
Thank you, Senator Vemelopoulos.
Hey, Senator, so you, like many other senators, are worried about like students' education, right? If these schools have to close down because they lose 30% of their funding, how are we helping students' education at all?
Like abjectly not true. The only reason they would lose that funding is if they don't comply. It's fiscally more efficient for like, even if training's expensive, it's still better.
How would they be able to comply if they're only able to afford training for 5 of their teachers?
Okay, spending a little bit more money on your teachers is still better than losing 30% of your funding. And also the teacher turnover rate.
That's my point though, right? They shouldn't be spending that funding in the first place.
Thank you. Since that was a speech and affirmation, negative speakers, please raise your placards. That goes to Dhingra unopposed.
I thank the chair. For reference, this is Representative Dhingra, D-H-I-N-G-R-A, speaking for the last time today. Is everyone able to hear and see me okay? Great, then I guess I'll get started. $8 million teenagers experience depression before reaching adulthood, but only 30% of them get treated. 3 million teenagers turn to drugs and alcohol to overcome this depression, but only 38% of them get the help they need. and 700,000 teenagers contemplate suicide at least once because of depression in high school. But only 28% are able to comfortably reach out to someone and alleviate the pain. Mental health is an issue that deserves all of our attention, but we need to make sure that our attention doesn't worsen the issue as a whole. Negate. Now, this debate fundamentally boils down to whether or not kids in K through 12 schools are getting the help that they need. They aren't. This bill asks us to hold this program in summer for every single year, but doesn't provide this funding every single year continually. So Representative Pradhan to Wilkes, these schools aren't going to be able to access the impact that you talk about. Representative Wilkes, you say that teachers will be more incentivized to show up for their students, but incentive doesn't matter when the funding doesn't even exist in the first place. And finally, Representative Yoon, you say that we can fund newer legislation to ensure that we can fund these programs in the future. I'm more than happy to give these schools my money, but if I don't see this legislation, I'm failing. But next comes the crux of today's impact and the weighing as a whole. Representative Vemalapalli, you talk about schools being underfunded, but fail to explain the direct impact that it has on the mental health of our children. Let me answer that question and prove how establishing this type of mental health program actually proliferates and worsens our mental health crisis. Increasing the funding and spending issue in public schools as a whole caused these types of schools to cut out counseling programs and other extracurriculars. The Boston newspaper writes in 2020 that extracurriculars like different basketball programs for girls and also counseling programs for all students were cut because these types of programs are statistically proven to help undergoing depression overcome their issues in school. When we force these types of schools to pay for a mental health program that they can't afford, we only hurt our future generations by cutting down the one thing that gives them hope, the things that they're passionate about. But the effects really come into play when taking a look at our students and the decisions that they make in the future. US News in 2020 writes that increasing the strain of poverty and lower budgets in public schools led to a 37% higher likelihood of a teenager taking their life. A 37% higher likelihood of someone losing their best friend. A 37% higher likelihood of someone losing their only child. And a 37% higher likelihood of losing the next leader of our generation. Representative Wilkes, I'll take on your burden. Not only will we have a mental health crisis in both worlds, but if we pass, lower income Title I schools will close as a whole. And Representative Pradhan, I agree mental health is our utmost concern. But if we're only going to worsen the issue, there's no point in passing. This crisis deserves our attention. But remember what our attention really is. Negate.
Thank you, Senator Dhingra, for that speech of 3 minutes and 5 seconds. We'll now move into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please raise your placards. That goes first to Pradhan, then Gutierrez.
All right, great speech, Senator Dhingra. So I just had to ask you about the question about funding. Is funding the main argument of your thing? And if the issue was solved, would you vote in the affirmation?
I mean, funding is a link to like my impacts, but what I argue is that A, it's not like continuous funding over the years. Representative Yoon tries to say we're going to fund new legislation. Legislation hasn't been brought up. And B, even if you don't want to buy that, there is no guarantee that all of these schools will be able to pay on time. If they don't, they lose 30% of their funding, which closes down.
Considering that the U.S. Department of Education is directly giving this funding, what says that these schools won't be able to distribute it properly?
I mean, okay, so you're going to provide $10,000 to a school. It takes $2,000 to fund 5 days of this overall program. You obviously don't have enough money to have long-term success. Representative Vemalapalli clearly champions this argument, and I prove the impact of turning mental health.
Oh, that's.
Does anyone want that next block? That goes to Wilkes.
I amend this bill to add more funding. Will you pass?
I mean, what I'm saying is even if you were to add like holistic, like overall funding, this funding is directed towards Title I schools, right? So I'm saying, A, there is no guarantee that all schools, including Title I with increased funding, will be able to deliver on time.
Who needs it the most? What schools need the most funding?
I mean, okay, it's not just Title I. Like Title I schools obviously need the most funding. They're the low income ones. But
Better than nothing. Are you going to fail this bill and allow mental health to still be a problem?
What I'm saying is you're increasing the mental health overall when schools are cutting out extracurriculars and counseling.
Thank you. So that was a negation speech.
Motion?
Yeah.
Move to amend.
Okay. DM me the amendment in chat. I'll check with our parliamentarian, make sure it's germane. If we're all good, then in the next cycle we'll vote on it. Okay, so that was speech and negation. Affirmation speakers, please raise your placards. That goes first to Senator Z.
Also, point of inquiry to my PO. I think I also had one more questioning on my third, but I didn't see my name on the president.
Yeah, I'll take a peek at that during the speech.
All right, thank you. At the leisure of those above me, please give me a thumbs up and I will now seek my second one. Okay, I'm gonna assume that we're all good. Lane tells a story. Throughout my school life, I was pretty unaware of mental health when it was not in crisis mode. My school had a good ethos of being able to speak to your teachers when things got tough. However, it felt like you were wasting your time if you went and you were not in a crisis. So I asked the Senate to stand with me in affirmation of this bill for these two very reasons. Because one, many teachers want to help their students get better, and we will have trained mental health counselors delegated from the federal government to train. When we pass this legislation, we help our students. However, how many children are suffering from mental health? On the Child Mind Institute in 2011, of the 74.5 million children in the United States, an estimated 17.1 million have a psychiatric disorder 1. More than students of children with cancer, diabetes, and AIDS combined. Half of all psychiatric illness occurs before the age of 14 and 75% by the age of 24. So what is happening here? That there is a lack of awareness and entrenched stigma keep the majority of these young people from getting help. And Senator Carroll and Wilkes, who spoke in negation, believes that the teachers are overloaded with teaching and with their students, but fails to actually hear the teacher's point of view. According to the Child Trends of 2019, one recent study found that actually 93% of teachers are concerned about their student mental health needs. And in 85% of schools are expressed their needs for further mental health training. So what does this mean? That schools and teachers are not getting the mental health training that they want because they actually genuinely want to help these students. And they're not being overloaded, but they want to help. But on the second reason you should pass this bill is because Senator Gutierrez believes that schools are designating what kind of training a teacher will receive. But he fails to understand in Section 2A, where it already says that the summer programs will be administered by trained mental health counselors designated from the federal government to teach the curriculum. And so when Senator Gutierrez believes that the schools are choosing them, nowhere on his legislation says that the schools are designating them, but the federal government is. And then when Senator Carroll advocates for professionals in teaching teachers for science of mental health, we will have already trained medical health counselors chosen by the federal government. So those in negation, I want to lay all your problems down, that we will have the correct trained mental health professionals to help these teachers understand the signs that may come. And not only that, teachers actually want to help these students. So when Lane tells us his heartbreaking stories that he could not receive any help from his school, he felt uncomfortable. And that is not a society I want my constituents to have. So pass.
Thank you, Senator Z, for that speech of 3 minutes and 4 seconds. We'll now move on to 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, raise your placards. All questioners, please raise your placards. There's 2 questioning blocks in this speech. Pamela Polly.
Right. So I'll just ask questions I've asked previous senators. So what exactly will this bill do to actually fix the problem of funding if it only affords for 5 teachers?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure Senator Yoon has already mentioned that we can literally just add more money if needed. And then furthermore, I think Senator Wilkes brought up the idea that we could possibly amend this legislation. But what my argument is against Senator Gutierrez
and legislation in front of us, is it yearly? Is this legislation gives yearly funding?
Thank you, Dingra.
Piggybacking off of Representative Vemlapalli, This legislation called for the program to be instituted yearly. What's the incentive for teachers to really come and show up for their students, as you would like to say, if the funding for the program isn't even able to go through and extracurriculars and counseling programs are already being cut?
So I believe like if the teachers, like if you don't like attend like the school, then you already lose 30% of their funding. And I think more schools would want to attend than lose 30% of their funding.
That's actually my point. Why does attending matter if you can't even attend?
Thank you. Two quick updates for the chamber. First of all, the little correction on the PO sheet was fixed. Second of all, the amendment has been ruled germane by me and the parliamentarian. So we're going to speed through some amendment procedure real quick. Sent the amendment in chat. We're adding annually after the word program in section 2C. So the money goes every year, not just the first year. If you wish to move to debate on this amendment, raise your placard. We need a 1/3 second to move to debate, and we have to move to debate before we can vote on it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, that's a third. So now we move to debate on this amendment. Is there a sponsorship speech or any motion on the floor?
Motion.
Gutierrez?
I move to previous question on the amendment.
Seconds? Objections? Wonderful. So we'll be moving on to voting on the amendment. All those who wish to pass the amendment, please raise your placard. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. On a unanimous vote, this amendment does pass, which means from now on, for the rest of the debate, you consider the word annually added to the bill. The funding is happening annually, not just one time. Anyway, since that was a speech on affirmation, we're now going to move back to a speech on negation. Negative speakers, please raise your placards. That goes to Nowinski unopposed.
I thank the chair. If I don't hear anything, I'm just going to assume everybody's ready. All right. Congress has never been considered a compassionate or warm or sympathetic institution. We have a bad reputation of being one of the most toxic and aggressive groups in our country. It's time we turn that narrative around. Fundamentally fail this bill, because it will irreparably damage schools all over the US and provide largely ineffective care. Before I start, I have to clarify something. As Senator Gutierrez explains, speakers on the negation today don't disagree with mental health considerations. Both sides of this debate acknowledge the grave importance of increasing mental health help. It's not enjoyable to point out the flaws or the shortcomings of this plan. It's simply necessary to ensure the best for the children. Let me elaborate. First, this bill isn't nearly as effective as it's intended to be. First of all, it only covers Title I schools. Now, I understand the importance of covering Title I schools, as they are typically underfunded. But according to the National Center for Education Statistics, the 46,000 Title I schools described in this legislation only cover about 25% of students in the US. Yes, non-Title I schools comparatively would benefit more, but our current legislation would leave 75% of students, millions and millions, without care. In addition, teachers are ineffective at mental health help. Other senators have already detailed this, so I won't go too far into the specifics, but giving mental health trained teachers to schools without proper therapists and counselors to back them up is simply scratching the surface of what we need to do in order to help students. But not only is this bill ineffective at helping students, it also hurts them. I want to go even further with Senator Vemulapalli's numbers. There are 46,000 Title I schools and $500 million of aid. 500 million divided by 46,000 provides about $10,000 per school. And with the $2,000 required per teacher, the average Title I school that has 40 staffers would face nearly $80,000 of cost. That leaves Title I schools two options: pay $70,000 extra dollars to train their teachers or lose a third of their funding. Now, Senator June makes the argument that Congress could just provide more funding later, but multiplying our allocation by 8 isn't just an inconvenience, it's a complete failure of this plan. Now, I don't even have to tell you how bad underfunding Title I schools is. The affirmative has been elaborating all debate on the damaging effects of underfunding Title I schools. How it disadvantages low-income communities by providing mediocre education, how it hurts students' mental health, and how it exacerbates income inequality. Every affirmative speaker must answer to the complete lack of funding. Senator Wilkes, I'm not failing this bill because it's mediocre or it could do more or it has some holes. It will literally worsen all of the impacts your side has provided. Every affirmative speaker's impact, especially mental health impacts like Senator Z's, don't apply when you make schools themselves fail. And that's why we must fail this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Zarowski, for that speech of 3 minutes and 14 seconds. We're now going to move into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, raise your placards. That goes first to Zhang.
Hi, Senator. You mentioned that 75% of schools aren't Title I schools.
Not 75% of schools, 75% of students covered by schools.
Okay, so do you think that the 75% of students attend schools that are fortunate enough to have mental health training?
I mean, they're probably more fortunate than the Title I schools, but we've seen mental health coverage in America. It's poor even in areas that, you know, have the resources to be able to do that, right? Because it's been stigmatized for so long.
Okay, yeah. So are you saying that we fail because this doesn't cover all students, even though it could?
No, I'm not saying we failed because of the
Going off of that argument, so let's consider those 25% of students. Why is taking a step to help them with mental health not enough?
Yeah, this is a mischaracterization of my argument. I'm saying the plan is not effective. That's defense. But I'm also saying it will hurt schools by underfunding them.
And that's the problem with funding, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So say we were to increase funding through an amendment again.
I mean, but 8 times what we're allocating, like that's absurd. Like,
all right.
Thank you. Since that was a speech on negation, affirmation speakers, please raise your placards. That goes to Marwaha off of recency.
I thank the chair. Hi, everyone. This is Senator Marwaha. I'll just give it a moment and then I'll begin. It's been a long round, so I'll try to keep this brief. Awesome. An old African proverb says, it takes a village to raise a child. The problem is our nice American village is missing something, and it's causing the children in that village to be depressed and have anxiety, and I'm sure everyone knows what I'm talking about by this point. Bingo, the American village is missing mental health training. Let's add that final puzzle piece and make our village picture perfect and pass today's legislation. So first, coming at the end of the round, I want to start with some cold hard statistics. The fact of the matter is the school system is missing any training, period. According to the American School Counselor Association, the recommended ratio is 250 students per counselor of mental health, but over 87 districts don't meet that number. That has been established. We definitely don't have enough personnel. And the solution under this bill is teachers. But Representative Carroll has a problem with that. She says that teachers have already been trained and we're just wasting our time here. Here's my question to you. If they're already trained, then why does the United States have one of the highest youth suicide rates in the world? Clearly, the current training is not going as far. We need more measures, which is why we passed today's legislation to add proper and official training. I understand that you've trained in multiple states and you've seen it firsthand, but I want across the board in every single state to have training to ensure we can save every child's life. That is my priority. At the highest ground on the negation, we waste $500 million. At our highest ground, we save the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of future students. But Representative Vamalapati would have a problem with that. He'd say, no, today's legislation actually hurts the mental health of students. It shuts down these schools. Here's the problem, right? I don't think it's absurd to double that number by 8 times. I don't think it's absurd to spend as much money as we need to save as many people as we can. If today's legislation even saves 10 of my constituents' lives, I'd be satisfied. And I think every single one of us in this room should value lives over money. No matter the cost, I will make that choice time and time again. Senator Wilkes, you asked Senator Zhang a long time ago, why not counselors? Teachers already have a lot on their plate. Why not counselors? If you're concerned about teachers being busy and them not being able to make an intimate connection, get this. Counselors have an even larger pool of students, with a school only being required by the National School Administration. Every 500 students, there needs to be one counselor. At least teachers have a smaller ratio than that. That's as good as it's going to get. And this solution is not supposed to be an end-all. It's a beginning. It's a beginning of a program, and that's something that needs to be clarified. We can do things in the future, and I'm with the negation. More needs to be done. Senator Wilkes dismissed this class. He told us class over, but I won't stop preaching until my constituents get the mental health care they deserve. Pass this legislation.
Thank you, Senator Waha, for the speech of 3 minutes and 9 seconds. Now moving into 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please raise your placards. That will go first, Nowinski.
Hey, Representative. I believe Senator Carroll's point was if teacher training programs in the past have been effectively useless, how do we guarantee that won't help in with this installment of teacher training?
Because as far as I'm aware, Senator Carroll never mentioned a federal, state, all the states program. That's what today's legislation is.
Oh, I yield my time.
Thank you. That goes to Senator Carroll.
I thank the chair. Hi, Senator. So part of the issue of the high suicide rate is the lack of student help. So why wouldn't a psychologist or psychiatrist designated to each school be effective? It's going to do more than the training will do.
I agree. We can do that in the future as well. I think this is a great starting point to see if we can make an effect. We can we can have a starting point, and then we can build from there. I'm with you.
Why not start somewhere higher where we know more children are going to get help quicker and faster than a teacher just seeing a sign and sending it to
on your side? I agree.
Thank you. Since that was a speech in affirmation, for the final time this session, call for a speech in negation.
I thank the chair.
Negative speakers, rise. Negative speakers, please rise. Who has not given a second speech? Okay. Seeing no negative speakers, Chair highly frowns upon a one-sided debate. Affirmative speakers, please raise your placards. There we go. Senator Sinha, you have the floor.
I thank the chair. What's up, guys? Senator Sinha speaking for the final time in today's session. Judges, PO, Parley, I'm going to assume y'all are ready. I'll give you guys 5 seconds if not. Okay. Senator Dhingra based his entire speech on funding, but failed to see the bigger picture. In today's world, where 1 in 6 children in the United States have a mental health disorder of some sort, where K through 12 students are experiencing higher levels of anxiety, depression, and trauma than previous generations, action is more urgent than ever. It's time we take a step forward. That's why we pass. Principally, pass today's legislation to improve the education of K through 12 students. In the status quo, students are struggling with their mental health, and their education pays the price. In a recent survey conducted by Hunt's Institute of K through 12 students, they found that 38% of students are more concerned with their own well-being, and 51% report being more stressed or feeling anxious. These feelings can impair students' ability to work or study and may affect their personal relationships. The survey also details that many high school students began struggling with social isolation, anxiety, fear of the future, and depression. When individuals face these feelings, most of their mental ability is used to generate and process unsettling thoughts. This can cause difficulty concentrating on positive thoughts and be exhausting for the student, reducing their learning ability. We change this with today's legislation because Section 1 mandates teachers to undergo mental health training. Now they are able to identify and assist their students, because as the International Board of Credentialing and Continuing Education Standards tell us, mental health training equips teachers with methods for reaching out to students while deepening their understanding of why early intervention matters. These identification skills are crucial to helping as many students as possible. This is extremely important. In fact, it's the most important impact in today's round, because with this legislation, not only do we improve the mental health of our students, but we also ensure that they are maximizing their ability to learn. Because when you train teachers in identifying mental health warning signals, it improves the mental health of our students, subsequently improving their educational experience. NCBI tells us on April 1st of 2018 that overall, students whose mental health improves have better academic process. In fact, when young people receive appropriate mental health support, they are more likely to improve academically over the course of their K through 12 time, are more likely to graduate, and more likely to attend and successfully complete college. So clearly, this legislation holds all the benefits for our students, which is what I'm trying to prioritize today. But I want to quickly address some of the issues that the negation senators have brought up. First of all, I want to address Senator Nowakowski's argument, who's basically talking about funding, something that's been going on over and over again with the negation. With the amendment we just had, where we've made the $500 million funding something annual, funding is no longer the largest issue. And as many affirmative speakers have said previously, if we need more money in the future, more funding can be added later. The thing is, mental health among our students is a very pressing issue. That's why we need to pass this legislation now, to ensure that we are doing the most possible. Senator Carroll tells us that teachers already have enough on their plate, but I think that the training this legislation mandates is worth the extra work for teachers if it means saving even one student's life. It's time we...
That's 3 minutes and 15 seconds, so I have to cut you off. Thank you for that speech. We'll now move to 2 blocks of questioning. Questioners, please raise your placards. That goes first to Nowinski.
Representative, how is the funding being annual affecting my argument about funding at all? You know what I mean? Like if it's annual, how does that change that it's still way too little funding?
Because it's more money, and even if you were to say it's like a reoccurring problem, we can still pass like more legislation later. The thing I'm really trying to emphasize here is that because mental health is such a pressing issue for our students, we need to take whatever
Last block of the round. Good year, yes.
Thank you. Hi, Senator. So Senator Nowinski and I both explained to you how under this legislation, teachers would end up providing worse care. How is that not a net harm?
Yeah, that's like not true. Senator Z.
Yeah, it is. When schools A have the decreased funding, B, local schools are the ones in charge of all this.
Question, let me finish. Section 2A says that these, mental health counselors have to teach a standardized curriculum. I don't really know what you're talking about. It's going to be...
Senator Nowinski brought up the funding problems as a result of it. How does that not lead to worse teachers?
Thank you. We'll skip the procedures, move to voting on this bill. Thank you guys for a great round. If you wish to pass, raise your placard. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If you wish to fail, raise your placard. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On a vote of 7 to 5, this bill does pass. Congratulations to the sponsor once again. We'll skip the procedures. The round is over. Thank you, everyone, for an absolutely wonderful final round at this tournament. It was really great listening to the debate. So we're going to do awards really, really quickly. It'll take like 2 or 3 minutes after judges submit ballots to get it in. So judges, submit ballots. Feel free to leave it awards either way. Try and get them in about the next 10 minutes.
irrefutably good nor irrefutably bad. Like that is irrefutably nothing, because it means that like the AF doesn't do anything bad, but you're saying that the only potential then is for them to do something good, right? So like, I just want to clarify that. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone. That was just like one big thing that I saw. Oh yeah, just adding on to that, like defense isn't inherently bad. Like if you want to say that, like for example, this bill is like effective, right? Or like on the AF, that's like somewhat defensive, right? Because you're just proving solvency. But like couple that with an offensive argument, right? So you can run defense offense, that's completely fine. But I just don't want to see like defense, because in that case, it just seems like not much is being said other than like this bill is like not doing anything.
Yeah, like I agree with that. And I think that like what could have been done, like I guess on the neg side, like on some of these bills, it's like provide a counter plan. Like if you're gonna say like the taxing method is like crap, all right, provide a counter plan that we can equal like the amount of revenue in a way that's not gonna be like counterintuitive to the legislation. And then now you have like an offensive and a counter plan that now the affirmation has to weigh the burden in the round of like why their taxation method is better than what you're providing.
Okay, wonderful, everyone. Both Leadership Bowl and results have been tabbed. We're ready for awards. Just going to start with a general statement. I want to say thank you to all of our judges for making this tournament possible. Thank you for our competitors for an amazing round. It was really great to watch all of you debate today. It was a really fun time. I want to say once again, especially if you weren't here earlier, please donate to our GoFundMe. We're raising money for eating disorder. That's part of why there was a mental health bill in finals. It's a really, really, really important issue, donating to an amazing cause called Project Heal. If you want to know more about it, reach out to me, I can tell you, or check on our GoFundMe. Our goal is $500 and we're getting a lot closer to that. So if you have a couple dollars to spare, any donation is great. So we'd really appreciate that. But with no further ado, I'm going to hand it off to Jimmy to start with the Leadership Bowl.
All right, everyone. So just to say congratulations for the round today. So let's get started with results. So in 12th place, we have Ada Z. In 11th place, Samira Sinha. In 10th place, Rashid Prandon. In 9th place, Stanton Nowinski. I'm going to hand it over to Joey for the next places.
Wonderful. We're doing 8 through 5. In 8th place, we have Sarah Zhang. In 7th place, we have Angie Carroll. We are now moving on to our top 6 debaters. In 6th place is Varun Vemalupalli. In 5th place is Arnav Dhingra.
Alrighty, let's get started then. On to our final 4. In 4th place is Mudit Marwaha. Congratulations. In 3rd place is William Gutierrez. And then in 2nd place, our runner-up, Ethan Wilkes. That means that your 2021 CARE Congress champion is none other than Sungju Yoon.
Thank you, everyone, for an amazing round. Hopefully we can see some of these faces again at our future upcoming tournaments. We have 2 more this summer. All the information for that on our Instagram. But once again, thank you, everyone, and we're going to take off now.
Thank you, everyone. Congratulations.
If anybody wants it, for anybody who wants it, I'm going to send my ballot, like the link on it, if you guys want to see it like sooner, I guess. But there it is with all the corresponding information. And good job, everyone.